Is for the Joint Committee to meet with DAA to discuss the management of passenger numbers at Dublin Airport. And I'd like to remind members that the matter of the Dublin Airport North runway falls outside the scope of this meeting, as was agreed by the members of the committee at a previous private committee meeting. So we all understand why that is the case, and it's unfortunate, but that is the case at the moment. So I'm very pleased to welcome again to our committee Mr. Kenny Jacobs, the Chief Executive Officer of the DAA. And just a note on privilege, that witnesses are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice that you should not criticise or make charges against any person or entity by name or in such a way as to make him, her or it identifiable or otherwise engage in speech that might be regarded as damaging to the good name of the person or entity. Therefore, if your statements are potentially defamatory in relation to an identifiable person or entity, you'll be directed to discontinue your remarks. It's imperative you comply with any such direction. And then members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice that to the effect that they should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person outside the Houses or an official, either by name or in such a way as to make him or her identifiable, and to also remind members of the constitutional requirements that members must be physically present within the confines of the Leinster House complex in order to participate in public meetings, and I will not be able to permit a member to participate where they're not adhering to this constitutional requirement. Therefore, any member who attempts to participate from outside the precincts will be asked to leave the meeting. In this regard, I'd ask any member partaking via MS Teams that prior to making their contribution to the meeting, you confirm you are on the grounds of the Leinster House campus. So I now, Mr. Jacobs, invite you to make, it's not so much an opening statement as you're going to do a PowerPoint presentation and talk your way through it, and then we're going to try and show a video at slide 27 of 43, and hopefully that will work as well. So go ahead.
Great, thank you, Chairman. I'll thank you for the opportunity. I think this is my third time at the committee, and in October we also were in the Oireachtas for the launch of our economic impact study for Dublin, and we will plan to do something in Cork, I think in the new year, to that effect as well. So thanks for the invitation. Very happy to be back here. I'll give you a run through of everything that's going on in DA. So as you can see from the presentation there, if I go on to the next slide, I'll cover Dublin Airport operations, Cork Airport update, flight paths, noise and the community and how we're working with the community in Fingal, the recent economic impact study, planning priorities and the infrastructure application that we'll be submitting in less than 3 weeks' time to Fingal, and the video will be on just describing what's going to happen in that infrastructure application and how we'll be really giving Ireland, giving Dublin a much better Dublin airport, and how sustainability is a key part of that. I will then go on to sustainability, and then there's a few other topics that we might get into that I might refer to, but there's about 20 slides that I will go through. And once again, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I'll go on to Dublin Airport. If you could go on to the next slide. It's nearly the end of November. We've had a good year at Dublin Airport. Operations have been stable, very stable. It's been a good summer. A lot of passengers going through. I think generally passengers very, very happy with the service that we've given them. Security has been performed really, really well. Very, very different to the previous summer. The standards at Dublin Airport were very, very strong. We did a huge amount of work in the run-up to the summer, really improving the things that matter at the airport. So we've invested in faster Wi-Fi, we've improved the toilet facilities, we improved the food and beverage offering, the retail offering, worked on the transportation options. And really getting it ready to be a much better airport for passengers in the summer, and I think we delivered on that. And a big thank you to the team at Dublin Airport who worked really, really hard to do that. If you can go on to the next slide, the feedback from passengers is very positive. So the Net Promoter Score, which is the question you ask passengers on would you recommend Dublin Airport to other people, that's improved by 25% compared to the previous year. So we're very happy with that. And 98% of passengers got through security in less than 20 minutes. So I first came to this committee, I think it was February of last year, and I set out what we were looking to do for the summer. We've more than delivered in terms of the queue times.
Probably February of this year, actually, was it? February of this year?
February of this year, yeah, February of this year. So look, we're very happy with that. I'm very happy with that. It's a very stable operation, and that will continue. So we've invested in a huge number of new positions in the security organisation. That's close to 1,000 people that we will now have there. Security is going to further improve as we roll out the C3 machines, security scanning machines, which are like MRI machines, which are much better for compliance, but they're also a better passenger experience because you're not taking the liquids out of your bag. So I hope some of you have had that experience going through Dublin Airport. We intend to roll that out across both T1 and T2, and also in Cork Airport. And in fact, it's something that I think in the coming decade you'll probably see it just become the norm in all European airports. If you go on to the next slide, we're driving a lot of innovation. I think it was at the last committee here, someone asked me about the viewing point that on the old airport road, and that's what that top picture is. So we're planning to ask Fingal for permission to really make that viewing point something much, much better for people who like to come out and see aircraft take off and land. I do that myself with my kids on a regular basis, and we want to make that one of the community initiatives that we have in the years ahead. A big investment in our app, a big investment in the whole baggage screening system that we have, the C3 security machines that I've mentioned, much more investment in maintenance, and really sprucing the place up, adding more food and beverage options so that when passengers are at the terminal, there's plenty of places to go and shop, which is obviously good for our bottom line as well. We've appointed a new managing director of Dublin Airport at the end of the summer. That's Gary McLean, and we've appointed a new managing director of DAA Labs, which will drive our digital innovation going forward. So there's a lot of digital happening in airports and in aviation in general. That's across security, that's across infrastructure, that's across sustainability, and it's one of the key areas that we ourselves see ourselves investing. I think sustainability and digital going hand in hand will be two key pillars of really driving the organisation going forward. Better lounges and even more seating for passengers. We've got about 500 capacity in our lounges. We'd like to double that in the years ahead, so that's a bigger platinum lounge, but that's also adding more lounge capacity in T1 and T2 because passengers are looking for that. A new Dublin Airport app has been launched, and you'll see regular updates to that app going forward. The new community viewing area that I've mentioned, further improvements in Wi-Fi and air conditioning. We need additional air conditioning because those C3 security machines, they create a lot more heat. More mobile phone charging points, including the repairing, Mr. Chairman, of some of the charging points that you mentioned the last time we met in October, and more EV spaces. So obviously EV ownership in Ireland is growing. We want to be able to offer people the ability to drive from anywhere in the country, park at Dublin Airport. The vehicle would be charged while you're on your trip, and then you would come back and pick it up, and it's a fully charged vehicle. Moving on to the next slide. I'll keep mentioning charges. We'll have a modest increase in charges in 2024. Again, just to remind ourselves, these are the regulated charges, so it will go up by about 5% next year. Again, I'd like to remind the committee that's while we have cost inflation of over 10%, and while airfares for the third year in a row have gone up close to 30%. So look, airline balance sheets are in a fantastic condition post the pandemic. Good luck to them. That's really, really good. They're using that money to invest in modern fleets. I would like the charges at Dublin to go up further, because even with the increase that we have in 2024, it's still less than half the European average for capital city charges. And I also think the charges at Shannon, charges at Cork should also increase, because it allows the airports there to further invest in the things that they want to invest in, like the rollout of C3, like additional resources in the organisation. I'll quickly come on to Cork Airport. Cork Airport had a very good summer. If you go on to the next slide, new routes have been added and will continue to be added in Cork. I think sometimes people say to us the DA is all about Dublin Airport. It's not. I'm from Cork myself. I'm wearing my Cork pin. And even with our infrastructure application for Dublin, you know, we're looking to grow Dublin from 32 to 40 million passengers. That's a 25% increase by the year 2030. We're looking to grow Cork Airport by more than that. Cork Airport doesn't have a planning restriction. There's a very big national plan to develop Cork City and County. I think the plan is by 2040 that City and County will have a population of 1 million. That will drive demand for travel. That will see further routes added in Cork Airport. So I see Cork Airport this year will have its biggest ever year for international traffic, and I will see that continuing. And we definitely want more airlines to fly to and from Cork, and it's had a very, very good summer this year, and the people of Cork are delighted to see routes added like La Rochelle, and I think you'll see more of that from both Ryanair and Aer Lingus. So Cork could get to 4 million, Cork could get to 5 million. We will be investing in the infrastructure in Cork. If you go on to the next slide, for those of you that know Cork Airport, if you go on to the next one again, please. And if you see that bottom right-hand picture, that's a diagram explaining what the infrastructure at Cork would look like. So that's a lot more stands. That's potentially a lot more aircraft as Cork Airport expands. We would knock the old terminal. Because in the place there you'd end up with a new pier, and using that new pier would be aircraft parked up against it, and that would be, as you come into the existing terminal, you'd go left down to that new pier. We'll also be rolling out the C3 screening machines in Cork. A solar farm would be developed also in 2024, and a new electrical substation was recently launched in Cork. So we have big plans for Cork. It's really stable. I see the airlines becoming more and more interested. Will some airlines say if Dublin's capped, we might put routes to Cork? Some, but it will be in the margins. I don't see lock, stock and barrel. And again, having worked in the airline business, airlines generally say, look, we'll look at Cork, we'll look at Shannon, and it's that regional competition between those airports. Airlines don't really look at it that we'll take a route out of Dublin and move it to Cork or Shannon. They will look at duplicating them, and I hope Cork and Shannon both grow in the years ahead. Moving on to flight paths, noise in the community. Quickly on flight paths, because I know it's a topic that was recently discussed. Look, these are designed by experts to align with planning and international safety regulations. We are responsible for the flight paths. We delegate that responsibility to Airnav Ireland as the ANSAP, and ultimately then flight paths are examined and approved by IA in its role as the regulator. So initially at Dublin, when the North Runway launched, we had a flight path that from August until February of this year, that was overflowing some parts of the community that were consulted. That was been fixed since February. We've apologised for that error that we've made, but I'm happy now to say that those flight paths are fully compliant to what was consulted with those communities, and that will continue to be the case. That's pretty much what I have to say on flight paths, but we're responsible. We do that with the Airnav Ireland, and we consult with the IAA, and ultimately they sign off the flight paths. On to noise. We released a document called the Facts on Noise recently, I think at the end of the summer, because we just wanted to really just demonstrate what has happened if you compare 2019 to now. So there's been a 50% reduction in the number of households impacted by noise compared to 2019. That's in 2022 and in 2023. There was always two runways at Dublin Airport. If you know that crosswind runway, which is used when aircraft are taking off in very windy conditions, that would have sent aircraft straight over Whitehall, Beaumont and Santry, and a huge number of households were impacted by noise when you have those windy mornings in particular. That's now changed with the North Runway. That's why we have a much smaller number of households that are impacted by noise. We are promoting, and we've announced this year, and it will kick in next year, an incentive for airlines that are using quieter and more sustainable aircraft. That will be a discount on the charges. We take noise very, very seriously. I think it's a big topic across Europe and across the world for aviation and airports. The good news is that, look, aircraft are getting quieter. I think Ireland is actually quite progressive when I compare it to other European countries on this. We have a very effective noise regulator in ANCA. We invest in noise monitoring to see where the noise is. There are strict noise contours that are managed by ANCA, and ultimately we have insulated 150 homes. That's 3/4 of the 200 homes that ANCA's noise modelling suggests that we could and should insulate. The 50 that haven't been insulated because those households haven't asked us yet, as soon as they do, we will say, yeah, we will go ahead and insulate them for noise. That brings the noise right down for those households. I see us insulating probably a couple of hundred homes in the years ahead. So we've got a relevant action with An Bord Pleanála. Within that, we have an additional noise insulation scheme that we would like to get approved, and then we would carry on with insulating more homes. We're constantly working on this with ANCA. We meet with them regularly, and we will continue to do that. So we take noise very seriously. For me, it's about monitoring. It's about insulating homes. For homes that are very near the end of the runway, we have bought out homes, and we will continue to do that. That's at 30% above the market price. Moving on to noise mitigation measures, I've kind of touched on this one, but if you just go on to the next slide. So 200 homes eligible, 150 done so far. We'll continue to monitor. We have good engagement with Kilcoscan School. I know that that's been a topic that has been discussed here. I think we had our last meeting, actually we did have our last meeting this morning with the principal of Kilcoscan School, and we are working on a few options there that we would like to put in place for the kids there, particularly the special needs kids that are in Kilcoscan. I've met the principal myself about a month ago, and as I said, we had a second meeting this morning, and we're exploring what we're going to do there. And there's a new complaint system in place, which is a good thing, because then there's full visibility on what are the noise complaints for ourselves, for Fingal, and for Anca going forward. Moving on to community engagement. I think we're a good neighbour, and we want to continue to be a good neighbour in Fingal, and this is something that you have to continue to work at. We have a 10 million community fund available for projects in the local area. 2 million of this has been invested so far since 2017. 100 plus projects will be funded this year alone. That's also supported by events that we've done, like the recent Halloween event in Swords Castle. Very good ongoing community engagement. We have people constantly out meeting households, meeting nursing homes, meeting schools, really engaging with the community to hear back from them what their views are, what more we can do, and we want to be a good neighbour, and I would consider us a good neighbour. So we're constantly listening, we'll continue to engage and do what we need to do and take their ideas on board. Moving on to the economic impact study. And look, it's Dublin Airport, but it is Ireland's airport. And I'm a big fan of all the airports in Ireland and general in aviation. But Dublin Airport is really Ireland's airport and is the gateway to Ireland. If you could go on to, keep staying on this slide, please. There's 116,000 jobs supported at Dublin Airport. I think really important to say that more than half of these are outside Dublin City and County. 9.6 billion in economic value added from Dublin Airport, so it's 2.3% of the economy. That's really important, and Dublin Airport plays a vital role in connectivity. It plays a vital role for business connectivity and businesses investing in Ireland, and we hear that from the business community. We launched this economic impact study in the Oireachtas with both IBEC and ICTU, because Dublin Airport is a key driver of economic success on this open periphery, in this open island on the periphery of Europe, and it's a key driver of jobs. If you go on to the next slide, 27% of the jobs are in Fingal, 21% are in the rest of Dublin, but 52% of the jobs at Dublin Airport are outside of in the rest of the country, and that's really important. Moving on to planning, and I am now on slide. No, we'll play the video at the end of this. On planning and the cap. So look, we will fully comply with the 32 million planning cap that is on Dublin Airport. That will only change when we get planning permission to go above that. So that is a matter of fact, and that is what we'll continue to do. That's leading to tough conversations with the airlines. I think you've had the airlines publicly saying that they're unhappy with the cap and that it should be lifted. We would like the cap to be lifted. I hope that cap gets lifted once we get planning, and I hope we get planning as quickly as possible, but that will take a while. We will submit our infrastructure application to Fingal on December 15th. The sooner it gets approved, the better. I think there will be challenges. It's a very good infrastructure application, and we'll play you a video in a few slides that describe what that will do. But until then, we will be fully compliant with the cap on Dublin Airport. The cap is a planning condition linked to surface access, so we will be managing to that, and we are managing down capacity. So we are actively managing down capacity. We have, taken out transit passengers. We've taken away a growth incentive from the airlines, and we will be looking at how do we manage this in 2024, and that puts difficult choices on the table. Difficult choices like charter flights, difficult choices like non-scheduled flights, difficult choices like general aviation, that we might say, look, what the priority will be scheduled commercial services with passengers on board. And that's going to create some difficulty, and I'm sure you may have had you will have several representations from people saying that they're unhappy with this, that the cap should be lifted, but we will be managing to the cap and the restriction until we get a green light on planning. That's going to lead to difficult choices, but that's what we have to do until we get the new planning. So the impact will be on general aviation and business jets, on sports and special events. So things like the Europa League final, things like the Six Nations and charter jets looking to come to Dublin Airport. We may be saying that you need to go to Shannon, you need to go to Cork, you need to go to Belfast because we can't accommodate you because we are managing to the 32 million. Just flagging that, that's not new news, but I think it's important that everybody understands that. If I go on then to just say a bit further on caps, if you go on to the next slide, generally caps don't work. If you could go on to the next one, please. And I think it was at the committee a couple of times, I think the caps at Schiphol were referenced. Now, this very week or last week, the cap at Schiphol Airport was removed. It was challenged by the European Commission that it was anti-competitive. There was a view that, look, this would be great for sustainability. All that happened was Air France KLM moved hub traffic to Charles de Gaulle. So that's really what happened. So caps don't stop flying, they just move the flights someplace else. A cap at Dublin Airport will really just make the airline say, well, we'll move to another big hub airport like Manchester or like Edinburgh. And an airport like Edinburgh is already talking to the airline saying, look, if it's Dublin's capped, we'll give you a special incentive to come and do transatlantic stuff at Edinburgh. That's not good for jobs here in Ireland. It's not taking flights out of the sky within the EU and the UK. It's just moving them elsewhere. There's another myth out there that, look, caps are, if you cap Dublin, it will move the flights to Shannon and Cork, and that's what happened in the Netherlands. Flights, when Schiphol was capped, flights didn't go to Rotterdam and Eindhoven. Again, it's hub traffic that just went to Charles de Gaulle. So generally, caps don't work for sustainability. Caps don't work for moving capital city airline traffic to the regional airports, and there's a better way to do sustainability, and there's a better way to develop the traffic at the regional airports here in Ireland. So I think it's a good thing that the cap at Schiphol has been removed, and in general I think caps don't work. It would lead to reduced jobs. So if Dublin is capped at 32 million for the next number of years, about 16,000 jobs that could be created in Ireland, in Leinster, in Dublin, in Fingal would be lost, and they will go elsewhere. Airfares will go up because simply the airlines would do two things, I suspect. They would say, well, we're not going to put our newest aircraft in Dublin. That's not going to be good for noise. That's not going to be good for sustainability. And if you've got demand managed down with an artificial cap, airfares will go up. It's as simple as that. And there's evidence to support this in the Netherlands and any other city that has had a cap. So, you know, Dublin is the 5th largest hub in Europe, and we want to develop that as a hub going forward and really improve the airport. But caps don't work. It will just move jobs. We will lose connectivity. Bringing that connectivity back is a big challenge. If Aer Lingus and Ryanair said we're moving the capacity that we had hoped to add to Dublin, to Manchester, Edinburgh, Gatwick and other airports, it will be a challenge for us to get it back and to get the jobs associated with that traffic back. And I think that would be the wrong thing for Ireland. It would certainly be the wrong thing for Dublin Airport. So moving on then to the timeline on the process for getting a replication in and the cap. Look, I think we're all aware of 2008, the economic cycle, the things that happened in the economy there, that led to a big dip in aviation. Then we were getting on with planning for the North Runway. Then we had COVID. That's why we're getting in the planning application at this point in time. Planning in Ireland, if it went faster, I think everybody would say that would be good and that would help us. But the infrastructure application that we will submit in December, on December 15th specifically, is a very good one, and it will show you how we plan to develop Dublin Airport. If you go on to the next slide, please. The key elements in that will be a new extended Pier 1 in the north apron, a new Pier 5 at Dublin Airport. So if you go through T2, you go through duty free, where you then go right to go to the gates, you'll now be able to go left, and that will be a new pier there for transatlantic flights. C3 security machines added in T1 and T2, and a new mezzanine floor upstairs in T1, where ultimately we'll start off with security, but then I think we'll move fast track to, and we'll have a new lounge there. In the airfield, we will have a new underpass getting vehicles to the west side of the airport. We will add a new apron drainage infrastructure, and on landslide, much more public transport infrastructure, parking and car hire facilities. I hope a lot more people in the years ahead come to Dublin Airport on the bus. I hope from about 2035 onwards people are taking the Metro North. That would be great, and that we have less vehicles coming with individual drivers, less people sitting on their own in the back of a taxi, and that more people are using public transport. We're ready for that. We've got where we would end up with the Metro North station at Dublin Airport. That's all ready to go, and we are absolutely a key part of that transition that we need to make. Moving on to the next slide, and I might show the video now, and then I'll say a few more bits on that. If you could play the video, please. Thanks. Which will essentially just describe what's in the infrastructure application and how the airport will develop. No. Well, I'll keep going while we're trying to. Yeah.
Just see if we can get it.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Here we go.
The first video on this committee.
Is it? Look, that's the Dublin Airport that we want to give Ireland. That's the €2 billion investment that we want to make in infrastructure. That's a Dublin Airport that can have 40 million passengers a year, and each of those passengers, creating less CO2 than 32 million passengers would today. A huge amount of that infrastructure application is investments in sustainability. That's a solar farm. That is land, that's new drainage, that's new terminals with more modern heating, more modern electricity. So the emissions for every passenger going through a 40 million Dublin airport will be less than the emissions than we would have if we didn't do this infrastructure application. An airport is like a home and is like a house. And if you don't do the insulation, if you don't double glaze the windows, if you don't have a modern boiler and do all those things, the energy usage will just continue to go up. So sustainability at Dublin Airport, any airport in Ireland or globally, will ultimately go backwards unless you modernise it with modern infrastructure. And a huge amount of that, there's about 500 million alone in sustainability investments within that infrastructure application. And I know some people said that can't possibly be the case, but it is the case. If we cap Dublin Airport and don't invest in infrastructure, sustainability will actually go backwards. And that's not what we want. We're looking to grow Dublin Airport by 25%. That's 32 to 40 million. That 25% increase in capacity that we think Ireland needs simply matches the 20 to 25% population increase that's forecast between now and about 2040. So Ireland is growing, the population is growing, and Dublin Airport needs to grow for sustainability. It needs to grow to protect our connectivity, to protect business, and to create new jobs. And that's ultimately what we're looking to do. And that's a world that we just saw there. That's a much better experience for everybody using Dublin Airport. Whether you're going with Ryanair to go short haul to the sun or you're going long haul with Aer Lingus or somebody else, that's a much better passenger experience, much better for sustainability, with great public transport connectivity to the terminal. And that's what we'd love to see, and that's what we'll be submitting to Fingal on December 13th. If I could move on then to planning framework and critical. I know the bill was announced this morning and we haven't had a chance to go through that, but ultimately in the planning and development bill, we had a number of key asks, and also we have a number of key asks on a national planning framework. Ultimately, we would like ABP appeals to be fast-tracked, cural deference and no encroachment on regulated areas, planning exemptions for certain infrastructure, design flexibility for strategic infrastructure, fast-track process where no planning issues arise. That would really help us make a lot of those improvements. Publication of draft decisions on highly complex or technical issues, and transitional arrangements concerning Dublin Airport to be recognised on a national planning framework. And we think this would help Fingal. And Fingal ultimately decide on this, but we think it would be good for to have a national framework that supports Fingal and any county council that is deciding on vital national infrastructure, that there would be a presumption in favour of sustainable development as it relates to global connectivity, ensuring that there's a roadmap for growth to at least 40 million passengers at Dublin Airport, which Fingal fully support, and address the potential conflict between national and local interests. Dublin Airport is Ireland's airport. Every single day, all 32 counties in the Republic and Northern Ireland use Dublin Airport. So it is the national airport, and it will continue to be as it grows to 40 million. If we go on to the next slide, I'll just touch on sustainability, which is a huge issue in aviation. And aviation, I think, is now taking it very, very seriously. And for me, this is really when we start to get on to Scope 3 emissions, and aviation is working in its totality. On sustainability, for me, this is about carbon. I think aviation is not the enemy. I think carbon is the enemy, and aviation needs to make breakthroughs and is working hard to make breakthroughs on how we reduce carbon. Part of that is passengers getting to the terminal on public transport. Part of that is passengers in the airports, and then part of it is the airports working with the airlines, that when those passengers leave the airport and they're in the sky in an aircraft. For the airlines, it's about new aircraft, newer engines, the use of sustainable aviation fuel. For airports, for us, it's about reducing energy usage, which we are making very good progress on. We've grown as an airport, but we are using less energy, and that's what we want to continue to do, and we want to take carbon out. So we have a net zero target by 2050. We also have a target to reduce our Scope 1 and 2 emissions by 51% by the year 2030. Those targets on sustainability don't change as we move from 32 to 40 million. we have to get the infrastructure application in, and we have to make these investments under the infrastructure application to hit those targets. And that allows us to be an airport providing Ireland with better connectivity and reducing carbon at the same time, working closely with the airlines. I've already mentioned that we've announced a discount for airlines with newer aircraft. That's the right thing for an airport to do because it incentivises those airlines with newer fleets. And then we want airlines who have very high load factors, because there's nothing worse for carbon than empty seats on a plane. So I suspect, and we will be really, really working hard with the airlines together, because I think aviation starts to crack this when you've got public transport, the airports and the airlines all working together to reduce carbon together. Net zero by 2050, as I said, green aircraft, zero waste operations, and really also looking at air quality and water quality in our local environments. Moving on to other sustainability initiatives, surface water environmental compliance is a key part of what we're doing. Airport charging, so that's supporting passengers charging their own electric vehicles, but we are moving to a fully electrified fleet of buses airside and landside at the airport. Mobility improvements, so cycle lockers installed, cycle wayfinding audits complete, cycle track with Fingal's being developed, T1 and T2 renewable heating studies, solar farm phase 1 will kick off. We've recently been awarded the Business Working Responsibly Award. We've signed up for the UN Global Compact. We're only one of 60 companies in Ireland that have done that, and we are members of the government's Task Force on Sustainable Aviation Fuel.
Just for that members, all the time, if you can just maybe speed up the last few slides, and then we'll obviously cover them, I'm sure, when we're dealing with the contributions anyway.
Great. I'm on to the last two slides. So just looking at the next one, if you could quickly go on to our sustainability investments. So, renewable heating, surface water, airport charging, the PV farm that we'll have, a sustainable fleet of vehicles, public transport. Look, these are all contained within the infrastructure application. That's what allows us to reduce the CO2 emissions per passenger at Dublin as part of the infrastructure investment. Similarly in Cork, it's about the same things, just at a slightly smaller scale, but what we are doing in Dublin, we will look to do in Cork. That kicked off with the investment in the electrical substation, and everything in Cork, everything that we're doing in Dublin, we'll look to do in Cork also. Okay, that's been generally my update. I'm happy to now open up to questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for a very, very comprehensive opening statement or presentation. And I'm now going to, just members are aware that the speaking slots were slightly incorrect at the start, so they've been corrected. And our first member to contribute is Deputy Matthews. So we'll put 9 on the clock, so 9 plus 1. So go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Carol, and thank you, Mr. Jacobs, for your presentation. I'll get straight into questions. Your cap is currently 32 million passengers, but you advertised recently in press releases that you had 32.9 million passengers. So is that a breach of planning conditions?
No, it's not.
Okay, why is that not a breach of planning conditions?
We are fully complying with planning. If you look at the planning condition on Dublin Airport, it relates to passengers coming to the terminals related to surface access. So that's people coming in vehicles to Dublin Airport. We exclude transfers. So if you fly Birmingham into Dublin, Dublin to JFK, you are not coming to the airport in a vehicle.
So just to clarify then for people that may be not familiar with this, you don't count transit and transfer in that 32 million?
No, we don't.
Okay. Does Dublin Airport in any way financially benefit from transfer and transit passengers?
Yes, we do.
So for financial reasons, you do count those passengers. For planning reasons, you don't.
And that's fully compliant with the planning law.
Yeah, in slide 21, you say it should be counted. Transfer passengers should be counted once, and transit passengers should not count towards the cap. So that's your interpretation. Yeah,
or look, the planning, we're very, very clear. The planning, and if you look at the planning, it relates to surface access. So it's people coming to the terminal. It is not people transferring within the terminal.
And did an Bord decision say that those extra passengers were not exempt development?
I don't think Bord Pleanála have made a decision on that.
Was there not on Bord Pleanála appeal or decision? So your excess passengers, let's call them the excess passengers over what the 32 million is, that was never described as not exempted?
That was never...
That was never ruled as
no,
to exceed your passenger numbers.
No, it wasn't.
In the form of transit or transfer.
No, it wasn't.
Was not exempt development.
No.
Okay.
Sorry, no. It was never decided on. They never gave an opinion on that. So.
Okay. So I'll move on to the night flights. Can you just clarify on the night flights? There was a restriction of 65 flights per night across the entire airport following the 2017 planning permission. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you're sticking to that, and you're sticking to that 65 level on average. If you could just explain how some nights might be higher than 65 and some might be lower.
Well, look, I'm limited in what I can say because there's a legal process on that.
Yeah.
We are looking to get the 65 movements changed because we think that's totally inappropriate. No one who granted planning for the North Runway intended that there would be less flights with 2 runways as there was with one runway. So we have a relevant action that's currently with on board Planola that would move from a number of movements to a noise quota, and that's what we're looking to have changed with that, and that's a much better option. We agree with that. Fingal agree with that. ANCA, the noise regulator, agree with that.
Okay, thanks. And is there other city centre airlines that have more restrictive nighttime flying than has been applied to Dublin Airport, say London Heathrow recently or Frankfurt?
Look, lots of different cities do it the same way. What would be the city in Europe with the greatest restrictions? I think probably Brussels.
Okay, and is there any case, or would you suspect that flights coming to Dublin are trying to avoid any of those, and they're using Dublin because it's a little bit more lax on nighttime flying?
No.
That's not the case at all. Okay, thanks. On the routing issue, we had a meeting before, and you said that, I think you talked about, you unexpectedly, in August 20, this is on page 13 of your presentation, local communities were unexpectedly overflown. So how do you unexpectedly overfly a community for such a long period of time?
Well, look, flight paths are complicated and they take a long time to work through. When the North Runway flights commenced on the North Runway from August to February, there was a slight deviation for some flights. So some aircraft, a small number of aircraft, were marginally overflowing parts of a community that weren't consulted with. That's been corrected from February. That's the most important thing. That was a mistake that we'd made. We apologise for that. The flight paths now that are operating are fully compliant, and they are the flight paths that were intended, and they are over the communities that were consulted with.
Okay, and I'm glad to hear that you met with Kilcoskin School recently as well, because I have been contacted by residents and parents of children that go there, really having difficulty with some of the noise issues. So from February 2023, your flight paths on the North Runway are as were proposed in the 2017, or sorry, whatever, the 2007 original planning application and the amended one in 2019.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so you're fully compliant with that. On the sustainability one, you clarify something for me. So you're saying if you get to 40 million, you can do these investment works at Dublin Airport, and that will allow you to be more sustainable in terms of your heating and your surface water, etc. But you don't include in that the extra emissions that would emanate from an extra 8 million passengers and flights that go with that.
And we don't. Now, look, it depends on...
No, that's grand. I just want to be clear. It's for the actual carbon emissions footprint, say, of the airport operation, but you don't include all of those 8 million passenger flights extra per year that's coming in and out.
I'll give you my view on those 8 million passengers. We would want those 8 million passengers to be on newer aircraft, not on older aircraft. We would want them to be on aircraft with high load factors, and that's what we are incentivising. That will be passengers, because we are not saying we do the airport piece and we don't have a view on the rest. We have a view on Scope 3 emissions, and we want that 40 million Dublin Airport and the Scope 3 emissions at that Dublin Airport to be an improvement on today. So that means incentivising the airlines and encouraging airlines, and this will happen. Look, you can see how Ryanair and Aer Lingus, the 2 biggest airlines at Dublin Airport and in every airport in the country, are investing in their fleets with newer engines, and that's a good thing, and that will continue. So those 8 million new passengers will be on newer aircraft using more sustainable aviation fuel as time goes on, and that's a good thing.
As we develop that sustainable aviation fuel, but if you're looking for it this year, we're not quite there yet with sustainable aviation fuel. But that's been my opinion on it anyway. Can I just ask you, in terms of an appropriate planning framework, planning exemptions for airport infrastructure, can you see when we've got so many questions yet to be decided, and I accept they're yet to be decided on compliance with planning conditions, when we've so many unanswered questions there, that to ask for exemptions for planning airports from planning, it's a little bit of a premature ask until we know, are you compliant and are you acting with your planning conditions?
And we are compliant, and we will continue to be compliant.
That's going to be, I understand that's sub judice, so we won't comment on that.
But we are compliant, and we continue to be until we get a new infrastructure application approved.
Okay, but I suppose there are many people who would say you're not compliant also.
I don't know if people...
And the judge will decide that, I presume, and I won't comment any further on that then. Okay, can I just ask you then, just very finally, my last slide, you referred to PFAS at the end of it, which are long-lasting chemical. Which, is that the South Apron or the Airfield Apron you talk about when you refer to PFAS? Because I know there's a substantial...
It's a new apron that we're building on the south side, I think.
And how many thousand tonnes of contaminated soil are to be extracted there? Would you have a rough idea?
Soil is being extracted anyway because we are doing building works there. We found very low levels, and I think it's important that everybody realises that PFAS is in soil in lots of different places. It's a long life chemical that was used in putting out fires before, so I suspect it's going in fire stations all around the world.
So this was around training exercises, etc. And it's gone on for years.
And we found it in very low levels. It's not in any water, and we're removing that soil anyway. And we've done this fully in cooperation with Fingal and the EPA. We've done the right thing here. We're being very, very cautious and very, very diligent. But again, it's very low levels. But if you find it at any levels, you have to remove the soil. That's what we're doing.
And the planning application for those works contained this, that you will be removing, I've seen figures of 80,000 tonnes of this going to Norway for remediation.
There isn't the capacity of a location in Ireland where you could remove the soil to.
But there's 80,000 tonnes of it going to Norway, is that correct?
I would need to confirm what's the exact tonnage.
And that's all done within your planning application for the construction of that apron, and that was all conditioned and part of that.
Yeah, we fully cooperated with Fingal on that, and the EPA were involved from the very start.
Do you monitor the water discharges to the Cuckoo Stream and into the Santry River and groundwater out of the airport?
On a continuous basis.
Okay, thank you very much for answering those questions, Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you very much, Deputy Matthews, and for sticking to your time. Our next contributor is Deputy Cathal Crowe. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Jacobs, for coming before our committee today. Could I just ask you straight off the obvious question? Are your figures based on the calendar year 1st of January, 31st of December?
Yes.
Okay, so just want to hone in because we're very close, obviously, to the Christmas season, and I note your own figures from last year, from December 17 to right through to the 4th of January, 45,000 passengers averaging per day going through the airport. Pre-COVID, that was 77,000. So pre-COVID, that 2.5 week window saw 1.3 million people transit through Dublin Airport, in and out through the doors. Could it be that this Christmas season, because we're hugely in the bounce back period now, this Christmas season, or perhaps the Christmas season of next year, will put you over the cap figure?
No, I don't think so. No, look, there's still...
There needs to be certainty because it's a legally imposed cap.
It is, and I've said, and I'll keep saying, look, we will be compliant. So excluding the transfers, where do we think we'll end up this year? Look, there's still 6 weeks to go, and you might have 2 very bad weeks of weather. Travel demand is a little bit softer this winter, so it depends what people are booking. But excluding the transfers that I've explained, we would be...
Is it you don't think so, or you're sure this won't happen?
I'm sure we would be 32 or slightly less.
You see, we've all tuned into Sky News come up to Christmas. You see people sleeping in sleeping bags in Heathrow Airport, trying to get home, and you also said in your opening statement that you frequently have to talk to airlines. You're constantly talking about this cap and the limitations it's putting on your airport. Is it conceivable on the 22nd, 23rd of December, somebody booked trying to get home from Melbourne to Dublin to see their family could be told, you know what, that flight now is going to Edinburgh, it's going to Shannon?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Look, there will be no disruption that any passengers, that any people need to be worried about family members coming home this Christmas. What we've been flagging to the airlines, and look, and they're unhappy about it, is what's going to happen in 2024, because we will be complying with the 32 million on an adjusted basis until we get the green light of planning. No one needs to worry about
that dialogue you have with airlines. You said 2 things which I think are contradictory, and one was on script and the other was not on script. You said sometimes you have to say to airlines you may have to look at Cork or Shannon, but then you said elsewhere that the airlines make this decision entirely themselves. Are you playing gods to a point in terms of deciding where airlines should go to?
No, we don't. Look, an airport's like a hotel. We have capacity, and it's up to an airline to come and choose. We can't stop an airline applying for slots, right? It's a regulated process, and ultimately, if an airline wants to go to any airport in the country or anywhere in the world, that's their choice. Where there is a piece is, look, there's a regulated process around scheduled flights. Any non-scheduled flights are
less of a priority, general aviation flights and charter flights. So if there was a massive, if someone said, I want to bring 250, if a new airline said, we want to go to Dublin and bring 500,000 passengers next year, would we be encouraging them? No, because that would put us in breach of planning, because that would push us over the cap.
Yes, and on that, like we've seen Amsterdam Ship roll back on their cap, and the first cuts they made were on business, small jet aviation, charter flights and general aviation. If you apply the same to Dublin, you've kind of intimated that's what's going to happen. I'd have huge concerns for the small jet travel. Doesn't matter to Joe So Public, but to Ireland Inc., when we're trying to bring all this investment in, and it's a very lucrative type of, I've never been in one myself, but the people that fly on those aircraft are very important to this economy, keeping it functioning. They tell me that not only are you making it difficult for them, they have plans to expand their offering on the western flank of the airport, but you're saying, no, everything has to come through Platinum Services. So have you already put the death nail in that type of aviation?
Well, there's a lot there. I fully agree with what you're saying, that is this difficult for them? Yes, it is. That's why we want the cap to be lifted. That's why we're putting in the infrastructure application. We're not making it difficult for them. The 32 million cap is making it difficult for everybody involved.
Aren't you making them drive 4 kilometres around aprons of the runway just to bring them through the famous or infamous Platinum Services?
We're not making them do that. That's the only way that you can do it at the moment, and we are exploring other ways to do it.
But you've unveiled your plan, and they've come to you with their own plan for what they would like to develop for that type of passenger. But I think that's been stonewalled by DA, hasn't it?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I met with the general aviation operators about a month ago. We have a very good dialogue on how we would, in the future, and as part of the infrastructure application, allow them to potentially be able to access the western part of the airfield more directly. If you take the underpass that was in the video, the underpass that some people keep saying isn't needed, it is needed, and one of the reasons it could be needed would be to get people from the eastern side of the airfield to the western side without that drive that some of them have at the moment, but not all of them have that. But I fully agree with them. We want the cap lifted. They want the cap lifted. Aer Lingus want the cap lifted. Ryanair want the cap lifted, because that allows people to grow and to operate. But until we get the green light on the infrastructure application, we will be managing to the 32 million. That's the right thing to do.
Can I next ask, you've told us that the planning application will go in on December 15th, and I also note that you're expecting this could take 2 years by the time we've had on board Planala, possibly judicial review, could take 2 years minimum. Are you trying to outrun the government in terms of the new national aviation policy? Because most of 2024, most of our work as a committee next year will be about looking at national aviation policy. And I agree, this cap isn't sustainable and something has to be done with it, and the only course to do it is through planning. But to me, it looks like you're trying to outpace government and a policy we're looking at. Your job, and you're doing well, is to manage the DAA group. But we've to look at aviation overall. And I think your comments describing Dublin as Ireland's airport, they're a little bit insulting in the fact that you've Cork, which you're the head honcho for Cork as well. You've Shannon, you've Knock, you've Donegal, and you've Waterford, where there's very little happening. But you've a whole network of airports in Ireland.
Leave out Kerry now, you get.
And Kerry, sorry, of course, Far and Four,
which I use all the time.
We have Project Ireland 2040. We've national strategies which look at. We're not talking about flip ending. Nobody wants to see a scenario where we've totally dismantled the current market shares, but we certainly need to readjust them to have 90% thereabouts, all going in now through Dublin, Cork, Kerry, Shannon in my own constituency, Knock and Donegal, all vying for that 10% market share. That market share you enjoy, that dominance of 90% thereabouts, will only go up further if all of this infrastructure is built. And I would say your angle to go in for planning here has to coexist. It has to have cognizance of Project Ireland 2040. It has to have cognizance of the National Aviation Strategy Review. And in my mind, it's taking cognizance of neither. It's just looking at getting 32 million up to 40 million.
I disagree, with great respect. Look, we are looking to grow Cork Airport by a greater percentage than Dublin. I hope Shannon, I hope Farm 4, I hope all the airports grow. I am a big supporter of Irish aviation. I am not flying the Dublin-only flag, and yes, DA is responsible for Dublin and Cork Airport, but the growth that we want at Cork and the infrastructure that we want at Cork will outstrip Dublin as the population rebalances in the country. My own personal view, look, in 15 years' time, if the regional airports have greater than the 10% market share, I think that could be a good thing. That could be a good thing for the economy. That could be good for Ireland. So I don't think we're trying to do this out of pace with national strategy. I think we're doing it alongside it. There is a really urgency around Dublin Airport because we are now turning airlines away. We're turning airlines away. We're turning growth away. That means jobs. That means connectivity. And that's why we want and we hope that the planning application will be approved as you know, if it takes a couple of years, it takes a couple of years. But I don't think we're at odds with national policy. I don't think we're at odds with aviation policy. We are, with Dublin and Cork Airport, the two biggest airports in the country. We are a key part of the gateway to Ireland, and we want that to continue.
Your ambitions for Dublin are impressive, but let me correct you again. It's not Ireland's airport. Ireland has a network of airports, and our responsibility in government and our Oireachtas committee is to all of those airports. And I would be hopeful that your plans, they're impressive, would fully align with Project Ireland 2040, which looks at sustainability, not just environmental sustainability, but this whole idea of having foreign direct investment, tourism, everything. And the lovely tourism model we had all the way down along the West Coast for years has been relegated to quick snap Instagram posts. Very few people now overnighting, spending money on the West Coast. This whole idea of having a lopsided country has to be addressed in Project Ireland 2040. Dublin Airport has to grow, so too have the other airports, and that market share has to be recalibrated. The very last question I have, if the chairman allows me, is you said you're a good neighbour. We have a litany of questions emailed to us from local residents. I just want to hit on one because you've some of their local representatives here. When have you met them? Because they're saying you'll talk about all the meetings you have with them, and I have 5 or 6 emails, but they can be summarised as when has he met us? Because we've never met this guy. He's never attended our meetings.
And that's not correct.
St Margaret's the Ward group were one. St Margaret's the Ward noise group would like to know.
I haven't met that specific group that you've mentioned. Every other week I'm out in the community meeting individual households. I've met Paddy Christie, the principal at Kilcoskin myself.
I just want to conclude by saying, will you please meet that group for God's sake? They're emailing me at the other side of the country. You are the head honcho of Dublin Airport. They have a major grievance with you. Please take it in there. And you know what? It could save you the world of hassle, because you'll be going down a planning route. You'd want a bit of goodwill from these people, not adversarial interaction. So you have some of the representatives here.
We'll meet them.
Go out
I will meet
them.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
I will meet them. Look, we have members of our team constantly meeting them who will have met them on numerous occasions.
But I'm asking you to meet them.
I will meet them myself.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for your time.
That commitment. Thank you, Deputy Crowe. I'm actually next up myself, and thank you, Mr. Jacobs, for coming in. We were very anxious to bring you in light of the cap, and I know I raised it in the Shannon with Senator Doherty that, you know, the last thing a parent wants is to not be able to see their child coming in and so on. And you did say you'd manage the cap and you'd stay within the limits and so on. But I'm just a little bit concerned. I mean, it does lots of wonderful stuff in this. I mean, it's a 43-page PowerPoint, 43-slide PowerPoint and the video, and a lot of very impressive work's gone into it. And I want to acknowledge that, and all of the good work that happened over the summer, all acknowledged. But my concern is that growth in Dublin Airport from last year to this year is in and around 5 million, 4 or 5 million.
About that, yeah.
Yeah. So that's from last year, 27-ish to 32-ish. If the same level of growth happened, which wouldn't even be the same percentage growth because the figure is bigger and it'll be a smaller percentage, we'd be looking at 37 next year. We're looking at nearly 40 next year. At the moment, we're talking about the planning process to get to 40 million being agreed by, if everything went well, the end of 2025. So you could be talking about building for 40 million when you're almost, if things weren't changed, at 40 million already. Is there not a need to be looking at 50 or 60 million? And I'm not trying to promote Aer Lingus' ambitions or Ryanair's ambitions. I'm just asking the question. You know, when the M50 was built, it wasn't built the size it needed to be, and it had to be retrofitted afterwards. I'm just wondering, is the level of ambition, and this is not any kind of climate change denying, but I'm just looking at, we're talking about the population increasing. Everybody acknowledges it will. If the economy goes okay, people do travel. People want to travel. We are an island. We've said all that. We're the Transport Committee looking at aviation. And yes, it would be great if some of the traffic went out of Cork and Shannon, and equally Kerry and Knock and Donegal and so on. And even Waterford if it gets up and going in terms of scheduled or charter flights and so on. But I'm just concerned that you're going to be turning away business as soon as you get the permission for 40, assuming that you do. It'll be a bit like Berlin or somewhere where the day you open, you're full, and that you're looking then to go to 60 million. And do we not need to be looking at additions to either your campus or indeed the Western campus. You know, there were, Minister Ross, when he was there, commissioned the Oxford Economics report about a third terminal. Have you seen that report? Are you aware of that report? What's in that report? Did it recommend a third terminal? Did it not? I know you have ambitions for the tunnel underneath and equally the western side of the campus for general aviation. But I'm just a bit concerned that all of this work is focused towards 40 million. If there was no cap, you could be at 40 million next year.
I don't think we'd be at 40 million next year.
Well, 36, 37, you know.
Yeah, but you, and I don't think we'd be at that number also. I think, you know, the difference between last year and this year was really, you were still having the return to travel post-pandemic. And I think that's now already kind of calmed down a bit. So if we didn't have a cap, what number is out there potentially? You could probably be looking at 34, I think, but I wouldn't go as high as 36.
But you're nearly 34 this year.
But including if you know, when you exclude the transfers again, we'll be complying, and that will bring us in at 32 or slightly under when we exclude the transfers this year. I don't think the return to travel and the growth from this year to next year will be what it was from last year to this year. Answering your question though, on is 40 million enough, and should we take a longer term view? I think we probably should, and I think that should be part of the national aviation policy discussion. If you take an airport like Abu Dhabi, which is, we run the duty free there, and I was there recently. That's an airport currently with about 26 million passengers, but it can take up to 45. So yes, infrastructure and planning in Ireland, I think we should take a longer term view and say, what is, you know, when will we get to 40 million? And probably we'll get to the 40 million by the year, we think we would get there by about 2028, 29. So yes, by the time we build that 40 million airport, we will nearly need to be in with another application to say where does it go next. But I think that's a topic for another day.
So in terms of this third terminal on the western side, what's your thoughts on that? Regardless of, I'm not talking about the land ownership. I'm saying, say the DAA owned all that land at the moment, would you be thinking about putting facilities over there? You are, you know, talking about having new stands over that area, talking about general aviation, and I might touch on the cap in terms of Deputy Crow's point. Surely an executive jet with 2 people, it counts as a movement, but it doesn't count as very many passengers in terms of your cap. I would have thought that an Airbus A380 or something, or a 350, a wide body coming in to do a charter flight, for example, the UEFA final, which is in Dublin next year. I don't think very many people coming to the UEFA final next year will really want to, with the greatest respect, fly into Cork and have to travel to Dublin, or fly into Shannon and have to travel. If they're here for the weekend, they'll want to fly in and out of Dublin. Are you saying that those flights are likely to be refused or negotiated out of the system or whatever?
Yeah, there's a regulated process, and within the regulated process, scheduled commercial flights take priority. So if, you know, people, charter operators and private jets saying, well, we've nothing in the schedule, but we just want to come to the airport, it'll be in a different place, and we might be saying you cannot do that. We currently say that to some people operating private jets, even with a small number of passengers on board. On the western side of the airport and the third terminal there, look, a third terminal at Dublin Airport, I think, is 20 million passengers away and 20 years away. And ultimately, I think a third terminal, if it is developed, will be alongside the existing 2 terminals that we have, not on the western part of the airfield. You know, anyone taking that view, and if you take public transport, that, you know, we want to go faster getting to the eastern front door that we have today at the airport, getting to the far side of the airport, that would take decades, I think, to get that public transport there. So I think a third terminal, for me, we don't need to talk about it yet. I think it's 20, that's really when you're looking at a 60 million Dublin airport, but I do think that would be alongside the existing 2 terminals, because that's where public transport
And what did the report that Minister Ross got, what did that say about that particular terminal?
That a third terminal isn't needed till you get to those kind of numbers, that, you know, the existing 2 terminals.
We've kind of all agreed that yes, we should be looking at them in the medium term, because my concern, and I think it's a reasonably valid concern based on the bounce back, you know, if you've gone up 5 million in 1 year to close to 32 million cap, even 4 million next year, and you're saying that the demand is softer, but I'm not sure how much evidence there is for that.
Look, I don't know. I can't predict what the global. Look, we can take a view on the global economy. You can take a view on the different airlines.
I mean, your point is like caps don't work, and they haven't worked in Schiphol, and they haven't worked in other places, and so on. And it's likely that Ireland Inc. will lose out rather than Shannon and Cork will gain from a cap. That airlines will just say, we're coming to Europe, but we're not going to go to Ireland anymore, or else we're going to base aircraft in other parts of the world where we can generate more activity and more profits. That's what, as you well know about Ryanair, it's what any airline will do. The plane is very expensive. The more money it makes, the better. And if it can make more money out of another airport than Dublin, off it goes.
Yeah, and those airports are more likely to be other hub airports.
Yeah, in other countries.
In other countries, yeah. Look, if in theory it did work that people said we can't get into Dublin, we want to fly to Ireland, we'll go to Cork, we'll go to Shannon, we'll go elsewhere, that would be great, but that's not how it works. And generally, when we talk to the airlines, and you can talk to the airlines yourselves, generally it's Dublin Airport is a hub, the regional airports are regional airports, and I want them all to grow.
And it's in all our interest that people come to Ireland Inc., regardless of where they land. But yes, we should be trying to spread it better than we do at the moment. My concern is that the board of DAA, you're the chief executive, you're presenting to the board, you're dealing with the board, that you're really not looking beyond 40 million.
Oh, no, look, we're putting a planning application in for 40 million. Are we looking beyond 40 million? Yes, we are. We take a long-term view, and will Dublin Airport be submitting a planning application after this one for a bigger number? Of course, we will at a point in time. I generally agree, though, should we take a longer-term view in Ireland on big infrastructure like this, critical infrastructure, I think that would be a good thing. But we are putting in a planning application that we want to get approved. We've gone through the pre-planning process with Fingal. 40 million will give us the capacity to be able to match.
That's the gut to 2-year process, more or less, excluding objections. So the earliest you can get that permission, you reckon, is December 2025.
Probably.
Yeah.
Look, if it was sooner, that would be great. But that's probably the realistic time frame that we're working to.
I mean, I am being somewhat critical, yeah. But it's to complement. There's been recent announcement there. Canada are increasing their service by 50%. JetBlue are coming in. American Airlines have increased 144% increase. WestJet are flying to Halifax. Yeah. So all this new business is coming in. So you're kind of saying you're not really encouraging these people, but they're coming anyway. It seems, or else you are encouraging them, one or the other.
But if you take those ones that now that you've listed, there's a long process in terms of an airline deciding that
I know, but they're all announced. They all weren't in last year's figures. They're all going to be in next year's figures. And plus population growth. Yeah. I'm kind of wondering why you think demand next year is not going to go up similar to what it did this year. No, with all these extra airlines, all these extra flights, plus Ryanair's ability to drop aircraft one place or the other. If Dublin had the capacity, I'm sure they'd be here. And
now Ryanair have announced that they are going to be removing some winter capacity, which they've done. And let's see what they want to do next year. Again, part of managing the capacity to 32 million in line with the planning, we have taken away a growth incentive. Some airlines won't like that, and they might decide to move aircraft elsewhere, and that might be the decision that Ryanair would make. On all the routes that you've listed, Mr. Chairman, I think they're fantastic. That's new connectivity for Ireland to places in North America and Canada that we haven't had before. They're small numbers in terms of the passengers and in terms of the number of flights, but it's really, really good connectivity. It's great for business, and it's great for the diaspora in those parts of the US and Canada.
Even though I'm the chair, I'm not going to manipulate the time. And just 2 points, and I might come back in later if we do have time. The private jet thing, I mean, in terms of numbers, I don't see why you'd be kind of cutting that off, because it's minimal in terms of, 20 jets would probably be the size
and we don't
of a flight
want
from
to.
Donegal.
Yeah, look, we don't want to, but we have to flag that if we're managing to the cap, if the demand is greater than that, we have to make choices.
My final point at this point, it would be just that the public transport access I've seen on Twitter, I know people who have posted on Twitter or X, whatever it's called, that they were trying to get the air coach at 4 o'clock in the morning, dropped their daughter down to Slorgan Park Hotel or Talbot Hotel in Slorgan at 4 o'clock in the morning, and the bus driver said, "This pre-book only, we're full, get a cab." Equally, I've seen other people post that came out of Dublin Airport, no taxis, no buses were all full. So the challenge is, what are you doing with the public transport operators to get greater and greater capacity from every part of Ireland? I know you make lots of money out of car parking, but still, the more people that can go by bus, that's the cap is all about landside access, and this is the problem. And what are you doing to solve it?
Yeah, no, we're working closely with the NTA and all the bus operators to try to get new routes added. Now, new bus routes have been added. I think I gave the number the last time I was here. I think 12 new bus routes have been added, and we want more and more bus capacity to come on stream. Now, I think it looks like Ireland has kind of gotten over the greatest difficulty on buses and bus drivers, and that looks like it's getting better going forward, and I hope that that continues. But absolutely, I agree. We want more people taking the bus to the airport. As part of that, we will work with the NTA and the bus operators that they put more frequencies on, add new places. I think you still can't get a bus from Castleknock to Dublin Airport, and we should have connectivity to all places in around Dublin and beyond, because a lot of people are wanting to come to the airport that way, and we fully support it and will do everything we can. Key part of the infrastructure application that you'll have seen is the bigger bus station. Dublin Airport is already the biggest bus station in the country, and we want that to get significantly bigger in the years ahead, as people are saying, yeah, I'm going away to Malaga for a week and I'm going to take the bus. I don't think enough people make that decision today, and we certainly want them to.
Okay, thank you very much for all of that, and we wish you well in all your future developments. The next contributor is Deputy Martin Kenny. You have 10 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Jacobs, for your presentation. Just to go back over a little bit of some of the things you said in relation to the cap and the 32 million. It is a little confusing, because I understand that you're not counting the transfers within the airport. However, these are people that are in the airport. And it seems to me that that's a selected interpretation on your behalf. Nobody else isn't counting them. Everybody else is counting them, bar yourself.
No, look, I don't fully understand. No, that's the way we count them. Look, the cap relates to surface access. That's very, very clear. We are taking out the people who are not coming to the airport via surface access.
But those people are still in queues. Those people are still collecting bags. Those people are still doing everything else in the airport.
The planning restriction doesn't relate to that. It just relates to people coming to the terminals via surface access. So it's about the surface access restrictions. If passengers transfer in, and look, this is a model that's followed in other airports around the world. That's why we're right to exclude the transfer passengers. They do not come to the airport in a vehicle, and that's the interpretation that we're taking. So that's our view on it. That's fully in line with the planning that we have. That's fully in line with the restriction that exists.
Do you think that will be challenged?
It may be. It may be, but we are confident in our position that that's the right and appropriate interpretation of the planning restriction.
Okay. In regard to the and you mentioned that the traffic that comes to the airport is something that you don't have any control. That you're like a hotel, that you organise the facilities and everybody else decides where they come to. Hotels, when they get full or near capacity, cooperate with other hotels in their region, in their area, whatever, to ensure that they can provide services for everyone. And how much of that cooperation is happening with the other airports? How much, like you've said that you can see a stage where, jets and certain flights may be restricted if you're getting close to the 32 million. Are you also trying to work with other airports to ensure that there is a share of the growth that happens? Because that's something that will clearly need to happen.
Yeah, that kind of naturally happens in airports in Ireland. Look, we don't run Shannon Airport. We run Cork and Dublin. So we have, but you do have cooperation. If I take the college football game that happened here, the one between Navy and Notre Dame, like a lot of jets came in, private jets came in, a lot of them came into Shannon, a lot came into Cork, a lot came into Dublin because we couldn't accommodate them all. So you do have that type of cooperation. If airlines, while we're capped waiting for the green light on planning, will some flights go to the regional airports in Ireland? A small number will, I think, not a big number will, again, because that's the difference between a national hub airport and the regional airports. But there is cooperation, principally between Dublin and Cork, because they're the two airports that we operate. But we will talk to Shannon on a regular basis, and we will continue to, and we have a good relationship with Shannon and the other airports.
The situation in Cork, and you mentioned Cork as an area where you give a specific portion of the slide over to that in regard to the development there, and that's welcome and it's good to see. Cork is not at a capacity, doesn't have a cap, doesn't have a limit, and I just wonder how much effort has been put into to develop more routes from Cork and into Cork.
A huge amount of effort. So we have a very good team, Cork Airport. Within that, we have a business development team. They would, for example, have been at the recent Routes event, which is a global kind of aviation event where you go and talk to airlines and try to convince them to come to your airport. So we were there, and we'll continue to do that. We will be announcing, I think, new routes coming to Cork in the near future that are exciting. A lot, which is really, really good, and we'll continue to work hard on that. As I said, Cork will have its biggest ever year for international traffic, which is really, really good. And ultimately, I want Cork Airport to grow by 40% or more at the same period, while Grublin's growing by 25%. So that
Is
region,
transatlantic part of that?
I hope it will be. I hope it will be. We're absolutely ready for that. And we have had some initial conversations with some potential transatlantic carriers. Now, I think in the immediate future, Deputy, I think, look, year-round connectivity to big European cities is better for Cork. So like capital cities that you can fly to from Cork in the summer, in the winter, all year round, and greater frequencies. That's probably what happens next, but absolutely at a point in time. And for me, the magic number is when Cork Airport is a 5 million airport, because then you really are a self-sufficient airport. When Cork Airport is a 5 million airport, will there be transatlantic connectivity? I'd be very disappointed if there wasn't within that. And that would be a great thing for the south of Ireland. That would be a great thing for Cork Airport. And it ties in with, I think, the government's vision for 2040 in terms of rebalancing the population and everything that goes with that in the country.
Yeah, I just, on a positive to mention that I wanted to commend the work of particularly the disability support staff in Cork Airport. Somebody recently contacted me about that and how good an experience it was, a person with a disability going through the airport, as I'm sure it is in the other airports as well. In regard to the development and growth, the growth happens within the airport and you have responsibility for that, but it has an impact on everything else around it, an impact on the roads, on the rail, on transport infrastructure and all other aspects. And we know, we look at Dublin Airport and you mentioned, you call it the airport of Ireland. It has, you either go to it on a bus or a taxi. There's no rail, there's no metro, that is a huge problem that we've got in our main airport in the country, and I think, you know, it's something we need to recognise. The other issue you mentioned as well in regard to sustainable aviation fuel and how the work that's been done on that. At what stage do you think we will have sustainable aviation fuel, or will we wait until legislation forces it to become the main source of fuel for our aircraft?
Ooh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one for aviation. I think that's at least a decade away, really, before you have it in those volumes. You know, I think the airlines have ambitious targets in terms of the percentage of their fuel consumption that they want to be sustainable aviation fuel. The production of it needs to really, really ramp up. But when is sustainable aviation fuel going to be the only fuel or going to be the main fuel that's used? That's probably at least a decade away, but probably the airlines are better off answering
Say it's
that
15 years away. The cost of it at the moment is almost 10 times the cost of standard aviation. I think we got that from the committee here before in the past, which would tell us that the cost of travelling is going to increase substantially.
And that's something that the airlines are constantly flagging, that as they move to sustainable aviation fuel, that airfares may go up. And will that happen or not? I don't know. Look, I used to work in an airline. I think definitely it's going to be a more expensive fuel. Will that get passed on in the form of higher airfares? That's traditionally what happens, and I probably would expect that to be the case. Yeah.
If the cost of travelling increases, will the numbers then settle down? Will it have an impact on the growth? Like, you're projecting all these growth figures based on where we are now, on pretty much on the cost of travelling today. If the cost of travel, like as I say, the cost of aviation fuel, we were told here at the committee, would be tenfold what it is now. If it's only fivefold, it will still have a huge impact. It'll probably mean the price of the ticket going anywhere will go up by double, maybe treble what it is. Will that surely not have an impact on these growth forecasts?
It could and it could not. Look, if you look at the demand for travel this past year and where airfares were, demand was like that, and airfares were even steeper in terms of the increase. So it really depends where you are. Look, in 2008, when we had the economic crisis here, yes, demand for travel went down because people had less money to spend. But at the moment, airfares are up, but the demand is up. So it really does depend. I think we are still right to, you know, have the infrastructure application to 40 million. It may be even followed by another one at some point in the future. I think, look, the world will always travel. I hope the airlines get there faster than 10 years on sustainable aviation fuel, and I hope it's not at a multiple of 10 or 5 in terms of what it's going to do to their operating costs, because that will really push airfares up. The higher airfares go, look, people will always travel and will always pay a certain airfare. But I think if travel, look, the first flight I ever took was from Cork going to London, and it was £380. What happens if we go back there, for whatever reasons, is that just ordinary people don't get to travel less, and that's not a good thing. That's not good for connectivity. So I hope that doesn't happen. But I think the world will continue to travel. Irish people will want to travel, and people will want to keep coming to Ireland. So airfares will go up a bit, definitely, with sustainable aviation fuel, and I hope the airlines crack it faster in terms of getting the volumes they need.
But surely the industry has done some forecasting around this. Surely it's just not me or you hoping. Surely
Yeah.
there's studies done.
There are studies done, but at the same time, if you take this today, there are 14,000 new aircraft on order. There's never been more new aircraft on order from the airlines. And IATA, who are the representative body of airlines globally, they're forecasting that demand. They're planning to, I've heard, double capacity in the next couple of decades. So the airlines are very, very bullish on fleet replacement. They're very, very bullish on adding new capacity. At the same time, there isn't a new airport being built anywhere in Europe. I think we might see for the next 2 decades no new airport being built in Europe. There was talk of Montijo near Lisbon, of Lelystad near Schiphol being added. But I think there will be a restriction on the airport capacity. The airlines are certainly quite bullish on adding capacity, and they've had a very good summer, and their airfares are very strong, and their profitability is very, very strong. So I think probably it's a better question for them to say where do they see demand going. We will still need to have a bigger airport because I think there is clearly demand beyond 32 million at the moment, and that's why we're putting in the infrastructure application. And I hope that, look, economically things are positive, and I hope that people continue to travel, and we can do that in a way that also brings down emissions.
Okay. Sorry. I'll bring you back in if there's time later on. Just conscious of the time and so many members. So the next contributor is Deputy Lowry. Great that you made it after your delay along the way, but you're here, which is great. So go ahead, you have 10 minutes.
Like half or 2 hours. Traffic jam. Yeah. First of all, I'd like to welcome you. I'm actually surprised that you're the Lone Ranger today. You don't have your chairman or people with you. Even Michael O'Leary wouldn't try that in here.
He was very well trained by O'Leary, sorry.
But firstly, I want to acknowledge the fact that I've been through the airport on a number of occasions this year, and we had you in here a number of times last year taking heavy criticism about the organisation, and in particular in relation to security. And I have to say my experience has been that it has greatly improved, that it's fast, it's efficient, and the people have been very courteous to the consumers, and I think that should be acknowledged.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask a bit more about this capacity issue. I just don't see the logic in it. The airport is a major piece of infrastructure. It's hugely important to the economy of not just Dublin, and it's the general economy, the Irish economy. And to have this situation where we have a cap on capacity, in my view, doesn't make sense. And when I look at your presentation here, you say that the cap on capacity means that you have to discontinue the transit flights from the end of October. You have to limit the pricing incentives for growth, which obviously impacts and discourages the airlines from increasing their growth and development. And we have a proposed suspension of slot applications for ad hoc passenger movements from early December. And then we have the impact on business jets and on sports and special event charters. Now, maybe you could elaborate on some of those, particularly in relation to sports and special events charters, because they're a huge source of funds coming into the country, and what kind of limitations is going to be placed on them. Could I ask you in relation to the 32 million? Obviously, it's a condition of the planning authority. You're going back in next month to increase that by 8 million to 40 million. Did you select the 40 million on the basis that that is the ultimate capacity of the two existing terminals, Terminal 1 and Terminal 2 combined? And if it is a combination of both, could you break down capacity that you have in Terminal 2 now and the capacity that you'll have additional in Terminal 1? And could I do recall very well when Terminal 2 was built, we had a huge outcry saying there was going to be a white elephant, and that it would never be productive. I can remember.
Poor Noel Dempsey was the minister at the time, getting awful abuse about it.
He was getting wrapped on a regular basis. And that brings me to the projections that you have. You're saying here that by 2030, which is a 7-year forward planning programme. Now, I think that that's not the proper way to approach this. I think you need a far long-term plan for Dublin Airport. I mean, it's got your application next year when you put it in to increase from 32 to 40 is going to take a minimum of 2 to 3 years to get through the process. So you're then into a 5-year plan for the remainder. So I think we need to have a serious look at long-term planning. I mean, we've read a lot and we've heard a lot about the bank of land that's available. You might explain exactly where that rests or where you rest in relation to that, to the purchase of that. It makes obvious sense to any people looking in from the outside that this land bank should be purchased and that should be held by the DA for further expansion. I'm quite certain that with the explosion in aviation travel, that the 40 million is going to be reached rather quickly, and then we have no forward planning for the years ahead. The other thing I'd like to ask you about is, I've raised this previously, car parking is a massive issue at Dublin Airport. People coming up from the country, people travelling, and they can't get a space in the airport. Expecting people to park in the city centre in a car park in the city, the cost of it first of all, and then having to get from the city or from the surrounding areas out to the airport itself, it's people resent that. Secondly, hotel accommodation. I think the last, and I turned the sod for the Great Southern Hotel, which is now the Radisson Hotel, in 1995. That'll tell you how long ago it is. And I don't understand why you're not interested in looking after your consumers by way of ensuring that hotel accommodation is available. You have the land out there. If you're not going to build a hotel, which I can understand because that's not the business you're in, but if you lease it, if you build a hotel and lease it, or if you provide the grounds for an operator to come in and build and own the hotel. But I think you need to do something about accommodation because it's a serious issue. Now, it's fine for us in Ireland because we understand it, but when visitors come to Ireland, first thing when you have them in Dublin, first thing they say is, you have no rail link to the airport, you have no metro to the airport. And as for looking for a bus, you will definitely wouldn't want to be waiting in the rain for it. So I think you need to improve. You mentioned it earlier. There needs to be a greater, far more frequency of buses from the city out to the airport. There need to be far more taxis at the airport, and buses need to run all night long, because Ireland is getting, the image of Ireland is tarnished every time people have a bad experience in Dublin Airport, and they are having bad experiences there. And it's all within our control if we just do something about it and take positive action in relation to it. So that's only my comments. If you could maybe elaborate on a few of those points.
Sure. Okay. Look, on buses and taxis, I agree it can be better. I mean, I think generally people, in my view, people are having a good experience at Dublin Airport. The bus and the taxi experience can improve. The taxi one, 90% of people get a taxi within 10 minutes. When does it go higher than that? It tends to be when if you have a gig in the Three Arena or a big sporting occasion on, there's generally a shortage of taxis in Dublin. Now, we've actively worked with the taxi drivers to get more supply coming to the airport, and that has worked, but we want to get more there. We are looking at improving the areas that you'd wait for a taxi in T1 and T2, and that's part of the infrastructure application, and we're actively encouraging more, at greater frequencies of buses and a better network of buses. So I fully agree with that. That can improve, and that's a key part of people coming to the airport in buses. That's a good thing, good for sustainability, and taxis we want to further improve. Because I think, look, the international benchmark is when you arrive in a Madrid or you arrive in another capital city, what are the transportation options that you have? And we need to improve that. That's the airport, but also that's beyond the airport because we don't control everything. But I hope it improves. Hotels, I also agree with. We're not in the hotel business, but we are looking at another hotel being added, and we do want to have an expansion of the hotel facilities because there is consumer demand for people to fly in and stay near the airport because it's kind of easier for getting back the next day. So definitely I agree there. We want to add hotel capacity, and that's something that's generally required in Ireland. The split on T1 and T2 deputy is about 40 to 45% are in T2, and T1 is about 55 to 60% of the passengers. Varies between the season, but that's typically what it would be. So T1 is the busier terminal. On the 32 to 40, look, that ties in with Fingal's development plan. That's a number that will, I think, secure the connectivity, secure the jobs, give us what we need at Dublin Airport until 2035, something like that. But we will be looking beyond that. I will clarify, look, on the cap, we're counting every single passenger. So we're counting every single passenger. We're just not double counting the transfers. So again, if you take my Birmingham example, if you come into Birmingham, into Dublin, and then you go Dublin JFK, we're counting that as one passenger, because that's you flying on one trip. We're not counting you as in from Birmingham and then out to JFK 2 times. So we're just removing the double count, but every single passenger is being counted in our compliance with the 32 million cap, just to clarify that. On car parking, we need more spaces. The Quick Park site is currently being determined by the competition and regulatory review. We hope that will get decided on in our favour. That would give us an additional 6,000 places. I don't think then that we'll have a problem. We manage car parks quite well, but we would need those extra spaces. And I hope that we will get a positive decision there, and that will give us those extra spaces in time for Easter of next summer. On the land bank, look, we want it. We made an offer for the land, and that offer still stands. And if they come back to us on that offer, that's kind of up to them. But our offer still stands, and it's there. I think they said, look, they had multiple offers. I think I've read recently that there's talk of it, going for planning on a third terminal. That would take a long, long time. It would take us a long time to get planning for a third terminal on the western part of the airfield. For someone else to do it, I think it'll take even longer. But we're definitely interested in the land, and that's why we've made a very serious offer for the land. And ultimately, I think we are the best owner for the land. But again, I'll say at the right price. And we don't see it as being absolutely necessary and strategic, but we see it being very tactically useful for us. And we would put stands there, we would extend an apron there, we might do a few additional things, but we want the land. That's why we've made an offer for the land.
Okay, thanks very much.
Just one question there. In relation to what I was asking you about Terminal 1 and 2,
yeah.
You have made an application, or you're about to make an application to increase from 32 to 40 million. That 8 million capacity, is that being found in Terminal 2, or is it a combination Terminal 2 and 1?
Both, and it's not too dissimilar to the current pattern. There'll probably be a bit more added in Terminal 2 than Terminal 1. There's huge demand. I mean, if you look at the places you can fly to in the US from Dublin now, and you compare it to 10 years ago, who would have thought it? Dallas year round, people would have said would never work. And we used to have a route network that was Boston, Chicago, New York. But we want to add more places.
Does that then bring you to the total capacity? Is that the max capacity of Terminal 2 and 1 at that stage?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, as guided by planning, that would be 40 million across the 2 terminals.
So what's the maximum you can take at Terminal 2 and 1 in terms of managing? If you get numbers, what's the max number you can go?
Or with the new buildings?
With the new build, what you're going in for planning for?
Yeah. Well, it'll be what we're going in for planning. It'll be 40 million. That will be 40 million split across the 2 terminals, slightly differently than it's split today.
Does that bring? Does that bring them 2 terminals then to maximum capacity?
No, I don't think so. I think there's an operating capacity, and then there'll be a planning capacity. So the planning, look, if we get
capacity.
Yeah, the operating capacity could be slightly higher than that. Look, we'll have more stands, we'll have more piers, you'll have more space within the terminals. You could possibly operate to a higher number than the 40 million, but we will have a planning, we'll get it approved, and it will be approved to 40. That's what we're seeking.
Yeah, so what the point I'm trying to get to is you're saying that that's your operational capacity. So does that not highlight the fact you're going to achieve this within the next couple of years? Does that not highlight the fact that there is an additional need for a new terminal in Dublin Airport?
I don't think at this point in time. I don't think at this point in time.
In 5-10 years' time?
In 5-10 years' time, a third terminal in 5-10 years' time, I think probably not. I think probably a further extension of the 2 terminals that we have. And that would be alongside. That might be called a third terminal, but it might be absolutely just, you might still be coming into T1 and T2. So I think it'll be again a further extension of the existing 2 terminals rather than what we would call a third terminal someplace else. And I don't think a third terminal someplace else, being the western side of the airfield, is on the cards. The best place to put it is where people can access it, and that will be on the eastern side of the campus, so alongside T1 and T2.
Okay, thank you.
Just on this very point, and just on bringing Deputy Senator Dooley then, the capacity constraint, I mean, we had a presentation from a briefing from the Department of Transport last week. The capacity constraint is really, it's not about the buildings operating. I mean, I know you made reference at one stage to the building now is a different building than it was in 2008 because we do self-check-in and we do bag drop, and all the times that we used to have to queue for. Now people don't have to do any of that because they can do a lot of it at home. They can print off their boarding passes, they can have them on their phone, they can drop the bag and so on. But the big 32 million thing was about getting in and out of the airport, as opposed to what happens once you go in the door of the building, let alone differently landside and airside. So it's that is the constraint. How are you're saying you're going to do all this work to handle 40 million, but it's really on the land side that you need to improve capacity, and how are you doing that?
Well, look, that's increasing the size and the operation of the bus station. That will include being ready for Metro North. That will include the transportation options are a key part of it, and the roads coming to the airport are
and indeed car parking as well.
And car parking is part of it, and it's based on an assumption that, and if you look at the past 5 years, more people are coming to the airport on bus, which is good, and that I think will really accelerate, and we will continue to work to increase the options there. But yeah, specifically, look, it's the surface access is what's driving.
So the buildings themselves could actually handle 40 or 50 million people. That's not the issue. It's about getting them onto the campus.
Yeah, I think I don't think could handle 40 or 50. Could handle a higher number than the 32, but the 32 is.
But with the additions that you're promising or that you're applying for, you could be more than 40 million. Within the building could handle more than 40 million. It's about getting them in and out of the campus.
It's about getting them. Well, look, let's wait and see what the planning judgment is. But yeah, it's more about the current cap is about surface access. We would be able to operate to a higher number, but let's see what the planning decision is that we hope we will get. But just before
that, it's the buildings themselves could handle more than. When you build all these new buildings, if you get permission, they could probably handle more than 40 million. It's about making sure you can have the ability to get people on and off the campus to 40 million.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Senator Dooley, go ahead.
Thanks very much. And welcome, Mr. Jacobs. Thank you for the presentation. Would you accept that currently the airport is creaking at the seams airside?
Airside meaning on the airfield?
On the airfield.
No, it's busy. It's busy. But look, it is in most airports. Now, it's interesting to go up to the tower and look down on it, and I would talk to ANI, and it's busy with vehicles, it's busy with aircraft, but look, safety is first and foremost in every single airport. So, creaking it seems I wouldn't say.
Yeah, the user experience that has to use the south gates on a regular basis, people that are coming in late at night, long way, they don't have, notwithstanding paying high airfares, they don't have a tunnel access or a
air bridge.
Air bridge. Ireland is renowned for its damp weather conditions, so it's not a good user experience. Now, you say that it's an airport for Ireland. I'd put to you that that's damaging to the image of Ireland. Somebody that's paying a first-class ticket, having to walk a considerable distance in the rain in the morning or in the evening to get to the terminal. I think from a business perspective, you're sweating the asset. I think you've oversweat the asset. And I frankly believe that the cap is appropriate, not just for the land side, but from an airside capacity as well. I think you're going to have to look broader than the airport then when you look at the land side. Take yourself onto the M50, and I'm sure, I don't know where you live, but I'm sure you have to use it, or if you don't, some of your staff do. That's at capacity, or close to it. They've now introduced, or the NDI have introduced effectively a demand management perspective in terms of reducing speed limits at certain times to manage the capacity. And there's proposals and talks about having a more progressive approach to charging for use at certain times of the day. So that says to you that the supporting infrastructure on the outside is creaking as well. I can't fathom why there hasn't been a more joined-up thinking between roads and airports from a state perspective that looks at the latent capacity that we have in our other airports. And rather than building more capacity at Dublin Airport, I think we should be building a high-speed rail link between Dublin Airport through the city and onto the city of Limerick and through to Shannon Airport. That's done in other countries. It used to be the policy of a previous Transport Commissioner, and I think it made ultimate sense. I get your point, Dublin is an important airport for Ireland, but the way you're going and the way the policy is going, you said there's people using it from the 32 counties. They don't need to. They shouldn't need to. if the cap was introduced appropriately, because a lot more could be done in the south. And I've listened to you before, and it's a position taken by others that, we lose these flights to Ireland, and you say Schiphol lost to Paris, and we're going to lose to Manchester or Edinburgh. I'm not so sure about that now. They're not exactly major hubs. Manchester to a point, certainly not Edinburgh to a large extent. We're still an island, don't forget. If you're in Schiphol, you can get from Schiphol to Paris by train between both airports. So yes, in that instance, it may be more a favourable comparison. But I have to believe that if Dublin, Cork and Shannon worked in much closer cooperation, some of the pressure could be reduced on Dublin Airport. I think you have effectively a self-fulfilling prophecy at the moment, where the more demand we got to build more, we're going to have to increase more. There's no competition with Dublin, quite frankly. No other airport can compete with you. That's a fact, just in terms of the size and scale that you can do. But I think if we thought about the passenger, we thought about the economic dividend across the country, we could have a much more joined up approach to the management of our current asset. 3 or 4 million more passengers to the likes of a Shannon Airport would make a huge difference to the development of the region. It would reduce the number of people that actually have to travel from the Midwest to Dublin to get access to other parts of Europe. And I think it would help to balance things, take away some of the pressure on the land side of Dublin Airport. And yes, you can have your own development plan as well, and Dublin as a city will grow. Other regions can grow as well. And I just sort of like to hear your thoughts on that, and if recognising you've got to get rid of some of your transit passengers now. I mean, you're still bidding for business to service aircraft that need to land in Ireland for technical stops at Dublin Airport, that there's no passengers either getting off or getting on.
We're no longer doing that.
Okay,
yeah, we're
that's
not,
completed.
And that's one of the choices we made in managing capacity, but that's, we stopped that in October. Yeah.
And then in where did you transfer them to? Cork, was it?
No, that's up to the airline. I think the airline in this case is it chose to go to Rome Fiumicino. Yeah.
Okay. And on cargo, have you looked at all at removing some of the cargo activity from Dublin?
That's kind of up to the cargo operators to decide where do they want to fly into. Look, flying cargo into regional airports to then put on diesel trucks to go back up to Dublin where the population live.
Doesn't affect the cap
either. It doesn't affect the cap, but it's not.
That's why the M50 was built. That's why the tunnel was built, because the cargo goes south anyway. A lot of it does, you know. So.
And again, and some cargo companies will choose to fly into the regional airports because then they have shorter onward journey to make. But that's kind of up to them. On the other point,
no. It isn't up to them. It doesn't need to be up to them, because if you say, no, sorry, I can't take you, they're going to have to go to the next. They're not going to land it in.
We're not saying that to them, though. They're not.
But I'm suggesting that if you were managing your demand in a way that looked at the overall piece, by taking cargo flights out of them and saying we're closed for cargo business, quite frankly. Next business, we're going to concentrate on the passengers that need to be in Dublin, and we're going to be able to get a little bit more. And you were saying that to Fingal County Council. I'm actually getting rid of my cargo business. That'll take trucks off the M50. It'll take cars off the M50. Why don't you offer something like that and do a deal with Shannon and let the cargo activity go through there?
Okay, look, there's a lot there. I'll do the cargo one first. So just to be clear, the cargo flights are not part of the cap because the cap is around passengers, not boxes.
But if we accept that there's activity on the land side with trucks on the M50, which is one of the constraints that is concerning to Fingal Airport, if you say, I'm getting rid of all the cargo, then you might get...
I think you'll still end up with the trucks in the M50. Look, the population that are ordering stuff on Amazon and all that population is still Dublin-based. A lot of it, you'll still end up with those trucks coming.
Well, I'd suggest it'd be quicker to get from Shannon Airport to Amazon's warehouse out on the N7 than it would be to get from Dublin Airport across the M50 on many days.
On that particular warehouse, maybe, but generally, look, I don't agree that moving cargo to another regional airport for those boxes to go on trucks, diesel-powered trucks, to come back up to Dublin is an efficient thing or the right thing from sustainability. On the other points that you made, just to come back to the south gates, look, a key part of what you saw in the video is also removing, changing the south gates, because I've flown there myself and I've kind of said to the team, look, we definitely need to work on this, and we were saying that to Aer Lingus as well, that this isn't a good experience if it's raining. So we're looking at things that we could do in the meantime to take away to improve that experience. Ultimately, with the infrastructure application, you'd go through T2, and instead of going out to the south gates and that long walk and then the bus, you'll just be going left to a new pier. So that will ultimately solve it. But in the meantime, we're looking to improve that particular part, because I agree it's something that.
So then, just because I have a short amount of time, so are you saying that you're happy enough to maintain the cap at 32 million until what you're now seeking planning permission for is constructed?
I'm not happy with the 32 million.
But you accept you're going to abide by that?
Oh, I said we're going to comply with it. I wish it didn't exist.
Best case, when are you planning to have that work completed that would allow you to lift the cap from 32 to whatever the demand might be? So where do you see that being pegged at?
I think 2 years.
Okay.
I think 2 years. I hope sooner.
So you expect to have planning permission and that work completed, ready to take passengers within 2 years?
We would be.
Hold on, just sorry to you had already said to me that you won't get planning permission.
That's what I mean.
2 years.
Yeah.
So you can't build anything until you have permission.
No, we can't build.
Okay. So you could
planning
start.
permission 2
now,
years.
I think the planning permission, if it was granted, just to contribute, sorry, if the planning permission was granted, it would raise the cap immediately or from the time the buildings were built? That's the question, I suppose.
It would raise it if it's granted. It will raise it. It will raise it once we start the work.
Once you start the work, once you complete the work.
Sure, I mean, I suspect that couldn't be the case. I suspect that it would have to be commensurate with the completion of.
Again, we shouldn't anticipate the planning authority's ruling, but just because we did have a presentation last week and it was quite useful. Deputy Smith was there as well. All this talk about the buildings. The cap is all about how you get on and off the campus, and it doesn't really make it doesn't need to make reference.
But I started my
I
started my comments in that the airside is creaking, in my humble opinion, using the airport more than I'd like to. If I could be using Shannon more, I certainly would, and I do when I can.
And again, just let me clarify, what do you mean by the airside?
So the stands that I talked about at the south gate, and otherwise being parked away from parked away from the buildings, and people having to walk. I mean, the stories that I hear are less than that.
In my opinion, as an airport operator, I don't think it's creaking. I can think of many other airports, like Gatwick, for example, where it really, really is creaking. I don't think we're running the airport too hot.
I don't think you want to
not allowed to make charges against anyone who's not here to defend themselves.
They're doing a great job. I think. Look, there's always things that can improve in a big operation, and the south gates, as I said, is one thing that we're looking at improving. Now, the improvement that we want to make ultimately comes in the infrastructure application video that you saw. In the meantime, until we get that, and we don't do anything until we get the green light on the infrastructure application, we will look at how can we improve that experience for passengers, covering them from the weather. We might look at can we make it a shorter walk to get out there, to look at the bus options out there. Ultimately, and again, just to clarify, we're not doing anything until we get a green light on planning. How long do I think planning will take us to get a green light from when we submit? I think 2 years.
Okay,
I hope
thank
sooner.
you, and thank you, Senator Dooley. Our next contributor is Deputy O'Connor. You have 10 minutes. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chairperson. Mr. Jacobs, it's good to see you. And we briefly crossed paths yesterday. So look, just in relation to, I suppose, the DAA, there's a couple of questions I have. Look, you've known for some time I've been very concerned around, I suppose, the standard of Terminal 1 in the airport. Look, I have seen some improvements around catering options and other things, but what are the plans of the DAA around your initiatives to improve the Terminal 1 customer experience? I suppose, just as Deputy Dooley or Senator Dooley was saying, in relation to overcrowding, that's long been a concern of myself as well. That stretch from when you go through your airport security, heading down towards the Starbucks location, that corridor in particular is very cramped when it is busy in the airport. And I just want to ask, is there anything being done in relation to address that? So there are my two questions from the outset.
Okay, T1, look, we've made good improvements in T1, and we had a good summer, and we've had a good year operationally. There's further improvements that we want to make. The C3 security machines that will go across all the airports, so Dublin, Cork, and both terminals at Dublin, and the new mezzanine in T1. So as you go into T1, there is that mezzanine that's there, that we have restaurants there, but we're going to be sending passengers up there because ultimately we'll have security lanes up there. The fast track might move up there, and we'll have a new lounge up there. So I think you'll have the new C3 security lanes where you don't have to take the liquids out of your bag. That's a big improvement that will be coming to T1. A new mezzanine floor that will take some of the passengers up there, and that will drop you down then into near where Starbucks is in T1.
And the C3, actually, that's interesting, just to focus on that, that's new to me. So you're going to bring passengers up another floor in terms of that, you'll have another floor of airport screening available, is it?
Yeah, some of the passengers will, you kind of come in, there's already an escalator going up there, there's an escalator going up there, and you would go into the mezzanine level and then go through security there, potentially go to a lounge there, and then you would come down to near where Starbucks is currently located.
Just in relation to, I suppose, look, the capacity constraints are something I've raised previously as well around the passenger cap. But look, inevitably, air traffic control when the economy is doing well, or air traffic numbers when the economy is doing well, they do tend to increase. And in Dublin, the case has been there's been a very significant increase when the economy performs. Look, it's worth noting that both terminals are in and around their area of capacity. And something I have raised previously, look, for the growth of airlines, particularly, you know, our flag carrier in Aer Lingus, I know it's now owned by AIG, but obviously it's important for transatlantic growth in other areas. Is there anything being done to look at the moving of the likes of the Unpost base and other facilities that are on the southern side of the airport complex to facilitate that growth around Terminal 2 and having more physical gates being constructed there in the I suppose the medium-term future? Yeah,
there's a whole new pier that will be constructed that Aer Lingus will use and other transatlantic carriers will use. That will be T2 going that way, close to the current cargo operations. So that would be the extra stands, the extra pier, the extra capacity to be able to offer airlines the ability for us to do much more transatlantic flights.
What's the timeline that you envisage on that process? You know, if you go through the process without having any, you know, I suppose, very serious challenges to that, you know, what's the soonest possible date we could be looking at that being constructed?
Once we get the planning application granted, so I think that's back to the 2 years that we'll submit the planning application on December 15th this year, so in a couple of weeks. I think it'll take us 2 years to get the green light on planning from that. If it's sooner, I would be absolutely delighted.
It's incredible, yeah. I'm not criticising you on this, but it's just interesting that it takes such a
the construction timeline, just on that?
Construction for that particular pier, that would...
But for all the works you're asking for?
Oh, the construction timeline. For all the things that we've shown in the video there, you'll be talking 3 years and beyond. We will want to add capacity, those aspects that add capacity sooner. So we will then get into the choice of what do we build first. If there's great demand, and there is great demand from the airlines, and I'm delighted that Aer Lingus, as part of IAG, are wanting to add long-haul aircraft to the fleet. They want to get the cap lifted. We want to get the cap lifted because then we can get on with this and grow the airport, make the infrastructure investments that will support sustainability as well. But back to Cork, we want to grow Cork by an even bigger percentage. And I think, you know, sometimes people say it's just about Dublin. It's not just about Dublin.
Don't worry, I have a few questions under my cap for that as well. Look, is there any developments in relation to the Cork-Brussels route? I know from my previous engagement with the airport, there's been an awful lot of desire for people in Cork to get that connection. And, you know, I suppose it was one that was appreciated in the past when we had that connectivity to that region, but it's been, I suppose, poor enough. But it is something that we definitely want to see being implemented.
On that specific one, I know the team in Cork have been very, very active working with airlines to add a Cork-Brussels connection. I think they've had some very, very good conversations, and we may have news on that front soon, which I think would be great.
Okay, so that's good to hear. So there's some development there is?
Absolutely. There's very, very good positive conversations with one airline on that particular route. So I hope that would be something that can come back into the schedule in Cork soon enough.
Perfect. The next question I want to ask, look, I was very disappointed to see the border pre-clearance facility planning had been declined. And look, obviously you have a long-running relationship with Fingal County Council. You know, that it could be argued that's an incredibly important piece of tourism infrastructure from a business and economic development perspective. Do you think it's sustainable that, I suppose, a local authority would have the key say over I suppose, what is the capital airport in the country, the largest airport per passenger numbers? Or do you think those decisions to be taken, I suppose, at a more senior level within government? What's your feel in that relationship, particularly with all the developments you've coming up?
Well, look, the relationship with Fingal is good and it is positive. We were disappointed that was refused, and we hope that does change. On where decisions should be made, look, the planning is, it's with Fingal at the moment. I think in the presentation I kind of proposed that we would have in place a framework that would support Fingal and any local authority that has critical national infrastructure. You know, it's not just Dublin Airport. So I think that's a matter for government to say, do we move it to centrally or do we keep it locally? At the moment we're set up and we have a good relationship, and we'll continue to plan that it's going to be done with Fingal. I think it would be in the national interest that critical infrastructure like Dublin Airport is done in conjunction with what we would call a framework to support Fingal, make decisions quickly, that appeals would move faster, because I think that's the right way to do it. In Europe it's done different ways. You know, in some countries it's done at a local level, in some countries national infrastructure is done at a federal level. But I think that's probably a matter for government to decide what way they want to do it. I certainly would be planning that it'll continue to operate through Fingal, and we'll continue to have a good relationship with them, but I think they should be supported in the process.
Okay. Just in relation to the rail connection, metro connection to the airport has been a huge issue for decades, and look, we're all very hopeful that the current plan will be advanced. Have you had any engagement from that side, from the Department of Transport yet, or from I suppose the different stakeholders involved? Have those conversations begun with the airport around how that's going to look? I know that underneath Terminal 2, something many people don't know, and it's fascinating, that there is actually a space that was built into the terminal originally for a metro connection to the city that's just been lying there. And it's incredible, you know, that's been there for so long, untapped, and I suppose that conversation is something that everybody nationwide, not alone in Dublin, are watching with great interest to see, you know, how that's progressing. So is there anything happening or started on that yet?
There is, yes. So there are ongoing conversations to say what's that going to look like. So we've got the station, where the station will be for Metro North, ready to go. We've got designs and that already in progress, and we're doing that in consultation with the NTA, with the Department of Transport, and we're really getting ahead of that so that we're ready. Now, when it comes, I think it's currently suggested to be 2035. The sooner the better, because I think we all would agree that if Ireland had that 20 years ago, it would have been fantastic, because that's what you expect in any capital city. But we're ready to go, and we are part of those conversations.
Yeah, thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Deputy O'Connor. Now, our next contributor is Deputy Duncan Smith. You have 10 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Just in the last few weeks, in relation to the planning application for Dublin Airport and the raising of the cap, there's been a degree of urgency in your language, somewhat catastrophising the impact it'll have on the economy, and even to go so far as on in the first weekend of November, the Taoiseach came out and said that he welcomed the lifting of the cap, which again I don't think was very helpful if we're looking for a planning process which we all believe in should be straight down the middle, where the Taoiseach is coming out before a planning application is even submitted, saying how he would like to see that determined. I welcome somewhat what you've said about your acknowledgement of just how complicated this planning application is going to be for the planning authority, because if you're to just look at the media, you would think that this is all just about raising a cap from 32 to 40 million, but this is a massive piece of infrastructure that you will be applying for, and it's going to be, I would imagine, one of the biggest planning applications that the local authority will have ever received. So I think, and I know you said it could take up to 2 years to decide upon. I mean, I think there has to be an acknowledgement that this isn't going to be a quick process, given the size of the proposed planning application that you've set out today. And if you want to provide a further comment on that, I know you'd like the system to be different, but the system is how it is. But I think the urgency that's been placed upon it from yourself and then with the Taoiseach's comments, I don't think have been helpful going into this planning process.
Well, I can't speak with the Taoiseach is will speak for himself. Is there an urgency in the language that I'm using? Yeah, there is. Why? Because we have constant conversations with the airlines. And they would be making their plans next year. Now, look, airlines, be they the big airlines, be they general aviation guys, be they the charter operators, they can say we can do what we want in Dublin next year by way of passenger numbers. So we had to introduce urgency because we are complying with the 32 million. Every single passenger counted, but we're just excluding the transfers. We're complying with that. Airlines have been saying to us as we look at next year what their plans were, and it was clear to us that some of them were thinking that we could operate to 36 million. Now, that's naive on their part if they thought that, but that's why there's a greater sense of urgency. We just have to flag to people that, look, we are going to comply as we are. That's 32 million. If the demand from the airline goes above that, then choices have to be made. And then there's a sequencing in the choices that you make. And that's why we're flagging things like Dublin to Malaga, that's currently flown by Aer Lingus and Ryanair, that will keep going because there are grandfather rights on those particular slots. But if a new airline is somewhere around the world thinking we can just come to Dublin and have 2 million passengers there, you can't. And that's why we're flagging to the airlines. The airlines are bullish. Dublin's a really low charge airport. They all want to come here. A lot of the ones that are here want to expand. But we're saying everybody can't do that and choices have to be made. And those choices will be made with the regulator because there's a regulated process on how that works. So I definitely see a greater need for urgency because I see what our airline customers are looking to do. I see the 32 million cap. We're complying with the 32 million cap. So therefore choices have to be made. So we're flagging that's what will happen.
I think also what you've said is that you're making decisions almost in real time when applications are coming in for new routes or flights or a sporting event or music event or whatever you're turning people down. I think it would be helpful for this committee that if you were able to present as much detail as possible. I'm sure there's commercial sensitivities here and all the rest, but for us to develop trust in that's the case, that if we were able to have examples of what you're actually turning down,
I'll give you some today.
Would be good. If you could, that'd be
no.
great.
So look, I won't get into commercially sensitive stuff. Have we turned some airlines who wanted to come to Dublin away? Yes, we have. Have we removed the transit passengers that used to be the Ethiopian passengers that were making a technical stop in Dublin, counted as part of the cap?
You mean you've lost revenue from that, but it wasn't. It was probably counting towards your night movements, but it wasn't doing anything for the terminal building. It wasn't doing anything except earning revenue from.
And we've turned down that revenue. We've turned down that revenue, and we've.
Was it part of your 65 movements at night thing?
Hang on a second, Chair. Yeah,
sorry.
Was it part? I'd have to come back to say was it part of the 65 movements? It was part of the 65 movements. It was part of the 65 movements. So we've turned airlines away, Deputy Smith. We are flagging that we might need to do more next year. We have removed a growth incentive that we used to have in place for airlines because we're saying, look, we are managing to the cap. Therefore, we're not going to be incentivising new growth until we need new growth. We don't need new growth because we're actively managing down. So we've removed, so that's Ethiopian have gone to make their technical stop now at Rome Fiumicino rather than at Dublin. And we have turned a few airlines away and told a few airlines that they can grow and that they simply can't say we will add whatever capacity that we want next year, and that process will continue.
In terms of the extra income that DAA would earn if the cap was raised above 32 million, is it as blunt as the airport charge times the number of passengers in terms of your income, or do you add, is there a further calculation based on other income through?
There'll be it won't be directly as blunt as that, but there will be the aero and there'll be the non-aero revenue in terms of what those passengers buy and spend money on at the airport as well.
Okay. You mentioned Schiphol Airport there, that they've removed the cap. Now, my understanding was with Schiphol that the Dutch government had imposed a lowering of flight numbers throughout the year, and that was going about 400 and something thousand. But that has now been paused because there's been a challenge from some airlines that were going transatlantic and had booked into next year. So it hasn't been scrapped, I understand. I think it's on pause whilst there's a legal challenge from airlines. So also another thing that Schiphol do, as far as I know they do, is they have infrastructure in place for noise mitigation on the ground. Now, you presented a large PowerPoint presentation regarding many different aspects of infrastructure you want to impose, but there's nothing in terms of noise mitigation, be it mounds or extra planting or the things that Schiphol do that people in Fingal and South Sword and St Margaret's would like to see. Is there still scope for you to provide such noise mitigation measures on the ground as part of the future development?
Well, no, look, a critical part of the infrastructure application, and I've been at some of the pre-planning meetings that we have with Fingal. Noise and how noise is mitigated, noise abatement, is a critical part of the infrastructure application. So we actively engage on a regular basis through the pre-planning meetings with ANCA as the noise regulator and Fingal on noise and how it will be managed as the airport grows from 32 to 40 as part of the infrastructure application.
But we do seem to be pinning your hopes on quieter aircraft into the future rather than hard measures on the ground that do have an impact that we do see in Schiphol, such as the mound waves and other things. So I just asked that to be considered. And just in terms of Metrolink, and it is Metrolink, there were documents released this year in terms of the submissions made by Dublin Airport, which are deemed by transport officials to be unhelpful in terms of the delivery of Metrolink, in terms of your own planning submissions. Now, I know you had a statement out kind of rebutting that, but even the focus of your content in terms of getting passengers into the airport has been based today on car parks mainly and buses. And like, Dublin Airport isn't the largest bus station in the country. It has the largest number of buses. It's a confluence of buses. It's not a bus station. We need Metrolink. There should be no growth in Dublin Airport, or any growth in Dublin Airport should be contingent on the delivery of a high-speed rail link to the airport. That should be, like, you're talking millions of extra passengers you want to be able to provide for a year, yet there's no bus system that's going to be able to cope with that. None. There's no car parking system that should be able to cope with that. We need a high-speed rail link. We need that capacity for our airport. And I think, you mentioned Metro North. This time, the last time we were in the committee as well, I think I still feel I need to see a bigger commitment from Dublin Airport to Metrolink, not just as a concept, not just but as a real desire that you need it. The area, the region needs it, and that I don't see how any future growth in Dublin Airport can be given the go-ahead without the delivery of that piece of infrastructure.
Well, I fully agree. Ireland and Dublin needs Metrolink, and we are fully supportive. So I can give you my total commitment that we are fully supportive. We have a state where the station will go, ready to go. I disagree. With great respect, that the Dublin Airport, I think, should be allowed to grow before the Metrolink happens, because that's just going to mean we're turning away jobs, we're turning away connectivity that may not come back. So I think more people are coming to the airport on the bus, and I hope that continues, and we're setting up that will continue. But I think the infrastructure application has the bus station as part of it. I consider it a bus station. Look, I get the bus from the airport myself sometimes, and it is just a bus station when you go out to the atrium near T1. So it is a bus station. That will get bigger. We're ready for Metrolink North. We are fully supportive of it, and we'll continue to be.
Okay. Thanks very much, Deputy Smith. Our next contributor is Senator Doherty. Go ahead, 10 minutes, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I think it's testament to the length of this committee meeting and the amount of people that have showed up, the interest that we have in Dublin Airport, regardless of whether it's our city airport or the national airport. Thank you.
Your local airport even.
Or my local airport. Can I ask you, and I know from the chair is going to tell me I'm not allowed to ask a question about flight plans, but it's just information that maybe you might give the committee thereafter.
Flight plans, yes, the runway, no.
No, well, I would have to say that on page 13 of your presentation today, Kenny, I would have to say I disagree with the information that's on that. And so on that basis, and not to have a ballyrag with you here, can I ask you for a complete list of all of the public consultation events that took place in the last number of years, the dates, the venues, etc., with the areas that you then felt would have been impacted by the plans for the new runway? And can I also have a catchment map of the 200 houses that you would have designated in the catchment area for requiring insulation? Because I think the reality of what's happened, notwithstanding that you said that things have changed since February, but I wouldn't think they have, I think is very different for people. So if you could supply that to the committee, I'd be very grateful. I want to talk about the CAP because I thought that's what we were here to talk about today in the main. I think it's interesting that when you talk about managing the CAP, you talk about it insofar as how you interpretate the planning application. And I think it's very clear to me and to lots of other people that when you look at the planning permission, which was based on the last infrastructural development on behalf of DAA, I think it's very clear that the combined capacity of Terminal 2 and Terminal 1 is 32 million passengers. And it doesn't say anything about surface access, and it doesn't say anything about only counting transit passengers once and not twice, or excluding transfer passengers. It says the entire capacity based on Terminal 1 and Terminal 2 is 32 million. And the amount of subcategories that planning application and that cap is based on has very little to do with the road in and the road out of the airport, although that is important. It's to do with drainage, it's to do with noise, it's to do with the buildings, it's to do with the EIS that was conducted at the time, it's to do with parking, it's to do with water. There's a whole plethora of conditions and conditionality as to where that 32 million came from. But you're telling us that you're managing the 32 million cap when we all know we've gone well over the 32 million and probably months ago, the same way as we did in 2019, based on interpretation. So Fingal County Council's interpretation would be one way, your interpretation is the other. We're actually kind of probably only fooling ourselves, because the transit passengers that do come in, some of them don't ever leave the airport, which is maybe grand, but they still have to access the water, the drainage, the noise. They impact on all of the other things, but lots of them do leave the airport, even if it's only for a few hours. So if definitively Fingal County Council were to say to you tomorrow, it meant all customers, what would you have reached capacity-wise to say at the end of October, year to date, and how does it compare to 2019? Well,
look, that's your interpretation of it. We have a different interpretation of it. We are interpreting and managing to the cap, okay? Our view on the planning condition is that it relates to surface access. Transfer passengers, therefore, should be only counted once. Every passenger is counted, but what we're doing is we're excluding the double count of transfer passengers, and we think that's the right thing to do, and that allows us and allows me to today say that where do I think the traffic will be? Look, there's still 6 weeks to go in the year, but I think we are fully compliant, and we will be fully compliant. It'll be 32 or maybe slightly under. Let's wait and see. But transfer passengers are all counted. But they should only be counted once, because they don't leave the terminal. They come in from someplace else, and then they transfer.
And I don't mean to be smart, but you say about your interpretation that you're fully compliant. If the actual, and I don't know where it says in any of the planning permissions, and I've searched the two of them, both the original one and the one, the appeal to Bord Panola, it doesn't say anything about surface capacity. It doesn't say anything about transfer passengers are excluded and only count them once. It basically says, on the conditionalities of what you applied for, the total capacity combined of Terminal 1 and Terminal 2 is 32 million. So you've now excluded transfer passengers, and you're only counting transit passengers once, as if they just flew through and didn't impact on any of the conditions with regard to facilities, parking, roads, water, energy, all of the conditionality on the access. So what is your interpretation based on?
Well, look, I respectfully disagree with your interpretation of the planning, but let's wait and see if that does get challenged. Our view is that it's based on surface access and passengers coming to the terminals at Dublin Airport, so surface access and that alone.
Yeah, but I'm asking you, what's your view based on? Because clearly it says
my view is based on the planning. My view is based on the planning condition.
But I'm reading it. I'm reading. The combined capacity of Terminal 2, permitted together with Terminal 1, shall not exceed 32 million, unless otherwise applied for by a separate planning.
That's one comment from the full planning. But look, my interpretation of the planning is that...
How you count the 32 million?
It's how you count the 32 million.
Does it say anywhere in the planning application to exclude transit passengers by counting them twice? Does it mention anywhere in the planning application surface capacity?
On the planning condition or the planning application?
On the planning permission that you were given, that the 32 million cap is based on, does it say anywhere to assume that there should be only surface capacity or surface access?
We think it does, yes, and that's why that's our interpretation, that transfers should be counted once and should not be double counted.
Would you mind then, please, given in the committee, maybe on a further date, the evidence of where your interpretation is based on? Because we're dancing around in the head of a pin. The people in Fingal, you talked earlier on about them being good neighbours, and I don't say this to you in any wish for the airport not to do well. I've been going to the airport since I was a kid, playing Space Invaders since I was about 4. I love the airport. I probably use it far too often. But I'm telling you, the people in the surrounding areas, notwithstanding the 26% of your people who work there from Fingal, would not tell you that you're a good neighbour. They're fighting with you for the last year over the fact that they have had aircraft noise imposed upon them that was never told to them in the first place it was going to happen. You never gave them an opportunity to sit in front of experts to say, this is how we can mitigate, this is what we can do. And again, here we are, you know, with regard to your DAA board managing risk, again, here we are dancing on the head of a pin of interpretation of planning permissions, interpretations of laws and rules. When we all know that you've exceeded the 32 million, and that's great because that means Ireland is booming and it's wonderful to see. But we need a little bit of honesty in our interactions, not just with this committee and with the Irish public, but particularly with the people who you say that you're a good neighbour to, because they would disagree.
And I disagree with your view on that. I think we are a good neighbour.
I think you're in the singularity, because I'm not sure
if I can have a chance to answer, please. If I can have a chance to answer, please, because you've spoken for quite some time now. I think we're a good neighbour, and we are committing that we will continue to be a good neighbour. And we are being completely honest and transparent. We're going to comply with the cap. Different people can have different interpretations and they're entitled to it. You can have your view on your interpretation of the planning permission. We have our view and we're entitled to that. But we are a good neighbour and we will continue to be a good neighbour. That's why we have the community fund. That's why we're out working with the community.
I think my interpretation is based on the English language that's written in front of me.
So is ours.
I don't have, any nuances to try and see how I can wiggle around them. What I'm saying is that the capacity of the airport was based on a plethora of conditionalities, and you've decided to base it on one. And I think that's disingenuous. And I think we should be having a proper conversation, Chair, about how we can all help with the new application, because we all want to see the airport doing well, but we don't want to see it doing well to the detriment or the sacrifice of the people who have to live in the environment.
And we absolutely don't want to see that either, and that's why we are and will continue to be engaged with the community, because they are a critical part of it, because so much of that community, as you well know, work
at the airport. Chair, and to be honest, Mr. Jacobs, I would tell you that community doesn't feel that. So if you're trying to say that
I disagree.
You are,
and again, I disagree.
They're telling you that they're not.
And again, I disagree.
So.
And if I take the Dublin Airport event that we ran at Halloween, we had a great community turnout. If I take the events that we sponsor at schools, if I think things that we're doing at the community, we get great support from people. So look, I respectfully disagree with your view. I meet plenty of people in Fingal that are supporters of what we do. We will continue to look to improve things, but I disagree with your point of view that we are a bad neighbour.
I think the community locally would disagree with it, but I think we'll have to agree to disagree. So thank you, Chair, for my chair.
Thank you, Senator Doherty. And it might be useful for yourself, Senator Doherty, and maybe Deputy Smith and whoever's locally based near the airport to maybe get a list of all these people and try and iron out with Mr. Jacobs. You might agree to meet some of these groups that say they haven't met you yet in the fullness of time, sooner rather than later, so that we can not have this interaction again and hopefully have better relations with those who don't feel they have great relations with you, but let's put it that way.
And again, plenty of people feel they have a good relationship with us.
I'm not doubting that. I'm just saying that there's a perception from Senator Doherty, at least, that some people don't feel they have a great relationship, and let's try and improve on that. That happens in all parts of the country.
Absolutely, yeah.
Where relations aren't ideal, and sometimes all it takes is a conversation and a chat and a bit of working together, and it can improve.
100% agree, and that's what I see when I talk to people in the community. They just look. They want us to. They want us to listen. They want us to demonstrate that we're listening, and improve things where we can improve things, and we'll continue to do that.
A lot of what I think probably a lot of the reason the raison d'etre of this meeting was I asked for this meeting because we want to discuss the 32 million cap and the potential it had for closing the airport on the 15th of December or whatever, because no more people can come in or get out because somebody's going to come along and say you're over the cap. Is there a definition anywhere of what a passenger, the definition of how you count a passenger actually is? I'm wondering why these Ethiopian flights are counted at all. I'm kind of wondering why you count the transit passengers as one rather than two, as why you're saying you don't count them twice but you count them once. Again, if you're saying if the criteria, and I'm not sure, Senator Roddy may be completely right, that the criteria wasn't all about surface access, but if the 32 million is based on surface access, the transit passengers, okay, maybe if you have a 15-hour layover, you might leave the airport, but the likelihood is the vast bulk of people, any flight I've ever transferred, you hang around the airport and then you leave, and you try and be in the airport for as short a time as possible. Do we have a definition of what you're interpreting, that you don't have to include maybe the Ethiopian passengers because they don't even get off the plane? The other people who come through the airport are counting as one rather than two, even though they came off one aircraft and got on another aircraft, and then everyone else is fairly clear cut. Is there anywhere documentation-wise from Portpanola, from Fingal County Council, from the Planning Authority, or from any planning regulator or whoever of how you count passengers? No, there's not, and that's why you then have different interpretations of what it is or could be. But there's not a clear definition of what it is. You have decided, for right or for wrong, and you might be completely right, to not include the Ethiopian passengers, the transit, the people who stay on the plane don't get counted at all. Is that right? I know they're a moot point. That no longer happens. But they weren't being counted for the cap. Those flights no longer happen. Our interpretation of is that they shouldn't be counted as part of the cap, and that transfers. But you haven't included them. Say, for example, they were here until October, and you didn't count them. Oh no, they have been counted.
They have been counted up until they were coming in and out.
As one passenger?
As one passenger. Our interpretation is that, look, transits, which have now stopped, and transfers, more importantly, because the transfer
they're treated the same?
The transfers and transits are treated the same, but the transfers should only be counted once. Every single passenger is counted, but the transfers only counted.
And there are no Fifth Freedom transits anymore anyway, so that's irrelevant going forward. And then everyone else counted twice. And you think you will probably get, in counting the transit passengers only once, counting the transit passengers, the people who didn't get off the plane, once, and counting all the other passengers, where do you think you're going to be on the 31st of December this year?
On the 31st of December, I think we will be compliant. I think we will be 32 or probably maybe slightly under, removing the, only counting the transfer passengers once.
Okay, and then the next point is where you're looking at permission to go to 40, potentially in 2 years' time. Building it takes another 3 years. It depends on whether or not Fingal say you can have the 40 million cap when they grant you permission, or you can the 40 million cap once you've done all the work. So that means we're talking 5 years from now, 2 years to planning and 3 years to build. So we're talking that the 40 million cap will only become permissible from December 2028 or thereabouts?
Well, look, it depends on how. Well, it depends when we get granted and how quickly we can build.
Yes, but I mean, I asked you the question and you gave me the answer of 3 years. I'm not saying you can't do it in 2.5. You said to me 3 years, and you're saying to me planning will take 2. So, based on your own, advice to us, that it's kind of we're talking 5 years before the 40 million cap, and yet based on last year's growth, I'm thinking we're nearly at 40 million next year, if there was no cap.
Yeah, no, look, we will first get planning. We'll get the planning application. Hopefully we'll get planning as quickly as possible. We will then decide which are the parts that we're going to build, what are the parts of that infrastructure application that we're going to build out first that will give us the capacity to be able to have the supply match the demand.
So you're hoping that the Fingal permission will say you don't have to do everything before you get the cap raised, that once you've done the piers or once you've done the new stands or whatever. Okay. And then you're saying at the moment that the board really doesn't have is not really thinking beyond 40 million at the moment, but it will need to do that soon?
Well, look, we're very close to putting in the infrastructure application, and that's for 40 million. So we're very focused on that. Are we thinking beyond 40 million once we get the infrastructure application in? We take a very long-term view. The board of DA will take that long-term view in terms of what happens next in the next infrastructure application.
And you mentioned you'd like your land. You thought it would be tactically helpful to have the land that you don't have at the moment between the two runways. If you own that land today, what would you likely be doing with it?
If we owned it today, what we'd like to do is very, very little today. What we would do in the next infrastructure application, and once we get planning granted, we would look at potentially an apron there. We would look at potentially remote stands there. You could look at some airport facilities there. But today we would be doing nothing with it.
And remote stands are where just aircraft just park after they've unloaded, or where people would actually pull up and be bussed in or something?
Could be both. Okay. Could be both. But but today, look, airports, you have to take a long-term view. People would have said, and Dublin Airport did make some very astute decisions in the past in terms of buying certain land, and it would be that for that long-term view that as the airport grows beyond 40 million, there would be uses of that
and
land.
I think it's to the credit of Dublin Airport and all the predecessors, Orient and so on, way back, that the land was bought 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, when people probably never saw the growth of Dublin Airport as to what it is at the moment. Just one thing, the Bord Pleanála, did they ever rule on whether or not transit passengers, transfer passengers should be counted, should not be counted, and should be counted as 1, 0 or 2 or whatever?
No, they haven't.
Never, okay. Deputy Matthews, you wanted to come in, so go ahead.
I did, thanks, Chair. Just on that Bord Pleanála matter, and in general, I accept that people interpret planning conditions, and that's why we end up in court cases a lot of the time, and that's fine. So in 2018, there was an application made under Section 146 to amend condition number 3. Amend condition number 3 to these origin destination passengers, as they were referred to. And the response on that from Fingal, I think the application was made to Fingal, was that was a material change. So you can't grant material changes under Section 146. It's generally for smaller clerical, technical type changes. So that's the first point where we have that passenger numbers or counting of passengers on exceeding that passenger cap is considered a material change. And a material change can't be exempted development. In 2019, GAA, under Section 5, which is an opportunity to seek a declaration as something exempted development or does something constitute development, you sent a Section 5 declaration to Fingal County Council outlining your concerns and is this increase in passenger numbers, etc., is it exempted or is it development? And then Fingal County Council referred that to An Bord Pleanála. And then An Bord Pleanála ruled on that. So when I asked you earlier on had An Bord Pleanála ruled on it, they actually have ruled on it. But they haven't ruled on that question because what they said was that the board was not satisfied that any of the questions came within scope of Section 5. So they were the questions that you put, so they weren't in scope of Section 5. The inspector's report, though, which I'm sure you read because anybody who has an appeal into An Bord Pleanála will obviously want to read the inspector's report as well. The inspector's report stated that use of the airport by up to 3 million connecting passengers in excess of 32 million passengers per annum. If those connecting passengers are facilitated by Pier 4 transfers, transfer facility and the combined capacity of the facility together with Terminal 2 as permitted and Terminal 1 would exceed 32 million persons per annum. It would contravene condition number 3 of the previously granted permission and therefore is not exempted development. So it's an inspector's report, but just let me finish. So your Section 146 application came back and said, no, that's a material change. So you would interpret from that, or anybody in planning would interpret that requires planning permission. Although Section 5 declaration, the questions were not of a standard that the board felt they could rule on it, the inspector did come to that conclusion. So all through the planning process, I think you've had a very strong indication from the planning system, from Fingal County Council, and from observers in the area as well, that you're not complying with your planning conditions. And I just wanted to put that on the record and come back to clarify what you said earlier on, that An Bord Pleanála had never ruled on that.
Okay, on that particular judgment, but I think, look, you've gone now quite detailed into a specific interpretation. But
it's not in a very specific matter. Most of the questioning here today has been on is Dublin Airport in compliance with the planning conditions? You are very strongly of the opinion that you are, but we have very strong indications from the planning system here, from experts, and that's in the local authority planning system and An Bord Pleanála, that exceeding 32 million goes beyond your planning conditions, and those extra passengers are not exempted development.
And that's your view that you put on the record. We have a different opinion on that and a different view on that, and our view is that we will be complying, and the board of DA are clear that we will be complying, and we are complying with 32 million passengers adjusted for this counting transfer passengers only once.
Okay, so planning decisions in this country are made in the interests of proper planning, sustainable development, and generally in the common good. I would suggest very strongly that your interpretation of planning here is to suit the business model and not to suit the principles of planning.
I disagree. Our view here is, look, we are a transportation business. We want to promote connectivity. We're not just taking a business-only lens in this. We want to grow the airport and we want the cap lifted because we think that's the right thing for Ireland. I think that's the right thing for Ireland. That's the right thing for jobs. That's the right thing for connectivity. And I think if shown today, it's also the right thing for sustainability.
So why do you want the cap lifted then? Why, if you feel that going beyond 32 million doesn't go beyond your planning conditions, why not just keep passenger numbers growing? Why do you feel that you have to apply for planning permission to go to 40 million?
Because we are a business that wants to fully comply with the law. We have to comply with the law.
So are you complying with the law at the moment?
Our view is we are complying with the law at the moment, and we will continue to comply with the law on planning until we get the new planning permission granted for the infrastructure application. And that's our view.
Okay. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Deputy Matthew. Deputy Vitt.
Just two more questions, Mr. Jacobs. In relation to the noise impacts on residents, we know the history of it, but we now have residents being impacted noise in a number of levels. I mentioned kind of the underground noise, but in terms of the flight paths and homes being overflown now that were never under any insulation scheme, and we can go around the houses on that. Is there any talk within DAA of revisiting this issue in terms of the homes that are now being overflown with the new SIDS, and we know from what we've had here in this committee in terms of the flight deviations, what the future of the North Runway is going to look like now in terms of those flight deviations and those SIDS. So we know from the WHO the impact that aircraft noise has on people's both mental and physical health. What we've been getting from the DA the last couple of years is that that's closed, noise insulation schemes are closed and they're moving on, and this is where it's at now. But is there scope for it to be reopened in a serious way, that there would be a new scheme or something, you know, beyond the new scheme for those residents?
Yeah, there is scope as part of the relevant action contained within that. We have a desire that we would potentially insulate a couple of hundred more homes. I don't know what the final number would be, and we would work with ANCA on this. So to answer your question on, look, will more homes potentially be insulated for noise? The answer is yes. There's definitely scope for that, working in conjunction with the noise regulator in terms of where the noise contours, are.
Okay, and just my final question, because I know we're well over time now. Look, it's in relation to, we had the St. Margaret's Ward residents group in here to meet the committee. It was held in private session. That was the legal advice on it. It was a tad unfair given the content of the meeting was top quality. Really great presentation, and the members who were present, particularly those who aren't as familiar locally with the issues and wouldn't be at the public meetings and have seen it, were very impressed, including the chair, the permanent chair of the committee. This group have been doing Trojan work in representing large swathes of Fingal, either through the banner of St. Margaret's Ward Residents Association or through Forum, Fingal Organised Residents. Would you meet them? And I'm not trying to go back over. We have the liaison group or all that. I'm not interested in that. But can you commit to meeting them, or a delegation of them? They have a public meeting on the 5th of December. I imagine what your answer would be if I asked you to go to that. But could you arrange to have an engagement with them? They are a serious group. It won't be an easy meeting, nor should it be an easy meeting given everything that we're going through at the moment and the communities are going through. There'll always be probably a natural tension between an airport and surrounding communities, but it is really bad considering what's gone on with the runway, with the flights, insulation schemes, and everything we've spoken about at multiple committee meetings. But I think it's a huge void in relations within the community of Fingal that the DAA is not engaging with this group specifically on the terms one-on-one. And please don't give me the Halloween stuff and everything and all those events, specifically about this group.
I can't confirm, but I'm probably pretty sure we have met them. But I would need to come back to you to say, have we met them or not? Because we've met so many different groups. Okay, so I would need to check and come back to say, have we met them? Will we meet them? Will we meet them again in the future? I suspect we will. May I go to that meeting myself? I'll try to go to that meeting myself. Look, we actively do engage with many groups and will continue to do so. Am I going to meet every single person that wants to meet? That's probably difficult to do in the near term while running DAA. But I've been out and I've met several groups. I've met individual households, I've been in individual schools, and we will continue to do that. And I think we're good at this.
But that group, for example, I'll finish on this. That group gave a wonderful platform for Kilcoskin National School, for example, to articulate to the wider community the impacts that they're going through. You've now met Kilcoskin National Group. That group have supported an awful lot of public representatives in these committees, an awful lot of people that don't have a voice in their community. And I think that, just to restate the point, I think it would be good if you met them and if you yourself personally were there. Thank you.
Yeah, and I will try to do that, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
To go in for a few minutes, so go ahead. 5 minutes.
I appreciate that, Chairman. Thank you. You're most welcome, and I appreciate you being here for quite some time, Mr. Jacobs, so I promise I won't keep you for too long, but I have been listening for the last maybe 40 minutes or so, as my diary allowed it. I'm finding it very difficult to square the circle of the commentary, particularly of Senator Doherty, my colleague, and most especially Deputy Matthews, who's the chair of the Housing Committee, which obviously has responsibility for planning. when he put it to you that on board Planola has ruled on a matter that you stated they hadn't. And while it wasn't on the substantive question, they've dealt with the question as a planning authority. And the difficulty I have with the answer that's been provided to the committee, and the reason I came down from my office, is because unless the matter is appealed or changed via a planning application, it isn't actually in dispute from a planning point of view. From an operations perspective, I would submit, from your perspective, of course, it is in dispute. But you still have a legal responsibility and a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that your airport is adhering to the planning conditions as they are set out as of today. So we're dealing with mid-November. We're dealing with flight plans that were filed a year ago, in some cases in excess of a year ago, relating to activity within Dublin Airport in 2023.
And Deputy Farrell, you weren't here at the start, so just to make clear, I made it clear to everyone at the start, and committee members would know this, that this meeting was all about the cap and how we had
this is specifically related to the cap.
And that's okay, but I just want to make sure you know that we specifically did not agree to talk about the North Runway or anything to do with
we're not talking about the North Runway.
That's fine. I just needed.
No, understood, and I hear you. Yeah, no, I'm speaking specifically to the cap, the 32 million passenger cap, as imposed by the planning condition applied to the construction of Terminal 2 and on the entire airport operation. But my question, Mr. Jacobs, is really simple, and you've commented on this a lot of times. You said you don't agree with what the members have put forward. You didn't substantively agree nor disagree with what Deputy Matthews had to say, and he really got to the core of the issue, which is that, I have it here, it's a 3-page decision of the board, it's online, where it sets out that under Section 5, that the questions that were put to you, which were referred by Fingal County Council, didn't satisfy them, and therefore they've left it to the planning authority, which is Fingal County Council, to interpret. And clearly Fingal County Council's view is that the planning condition is 32 million until such time as it's changed. So my question to you is, and this is, I suppose, part of the difficulty with being a representative of North County Dublin for the last 20 years, or almost 20 years as I have been, is that when you refer to yourself as a good neighbour, a lot of people in the community have a difficulty with that. And they won't be swayed by your outreach programmes, regardless of how many millions of euros it is, because it's not about that. For them, it's about being able to sleep in their beds at night without interruption. It's about access to, unfettered access to night flights, which I know is subject to a court action. We won't talk about that. But that is featuring in their views, many hundreds of whom have no doubt communicated with Deputy Smith and I, because we both represent the same communities. And it is very difficult for us to hear that you're a good neighbour in the context of the feedback that we get as public representatives. I spent the last year canvassing the entirety of Swords, and the closer I got to the airport, the more it came up. The more issues with proximity noise, which obviously has an impact on passenger numbers. And then in Portmarnock and St Margaret's and places like that, where you have a great deal of difficulties with flights deviating, in their view, from flight paths. For instance, really, really quickly, Chair, you know, there was a 3% deviation. I know you don't manage the skies, but it's your airport. There was a 3% deviation from South Runway, the original runway, over Portmarnock on departures over the RC in recent months. There was a 90-degree variation amongst other things over the last few days.
That's again the North Runway stuff. So,
but again, it goes down to the passenger numbers and the credibility of the airport when it comes to making statements like we're good neighbours and we're adhering to the cap, when demonstrably we know the opposite is the case.
There's a lot in that. If I can reply.
We're not
finished, Chairman.
None of us are allowed to make charges, so just be careful. Do you want to, Mr. Jacobs, back in?
I would love for Mr. Jacobs to respond.
Look, on the flight paths are now fully compliant. Okay, so there were there was a period of a small number of deviations. That's now corrected. We apologise for that. We should have got that right. It is now right, and the flight paths are fully compliant. That's the first thing I'd say. Secondly, on noise, and if we just take households in Fingal, 2023 compared to 2019, there are fewer households in Fingal impacted by noise. Yeah. Okay, that's a fact in our point from our point of view. On the interpretation of the cap and counting the transfers only once within the cap, that's our view. Okay, other people will have a different view, and I think we are a good neighbour. That's something we will continue to work on, and I don't think we have an outreach programme. I think we have more than that. And we have a good relationship with Fingal Council, and we have a good relationship with the community. We want to improve that, and we want to listen to them, and we want them to be part of that, and them feel it's a good relationship. There will always be parts that say, no, they don't think it's a good relationship. But I know plenty of people in Fingal who
so do I, Mr. Jacobs. I'm not disputing that. I'm only talking about the people that have issue with it because of their interpretation of the planning law as it currently stands, as interpreted by An Bord Pleanála in this decision in 2020. And by the 2006 planning permission. And I think therein lies the problem. I don't believe, and I'd maybe put this on record, Chair, I don't think it is a matter for the DAA, nor its board, nor you as its chief executive to interpret planning law.
No, our job is to comply with planning law.
Correct.
And we are complying with planning law, and that's my view. That's the view of the DAA board, that we are and will continue to comply with the planning law until we get a new permission granted on a new infrastructure application.
Could I ask for one piece of clarity, Mr. Chairman? And please, my apologies to Mr. Jacob if you've already answered this question or made it clear. If you mentioned earlier under questioning from Senator Doherty that you're going to be close to or at the 32 million passengers for 2023. Does that include transfer passengers or the transfer passengers extra?
It includes transfer passengers, but it only counts them once. So it removes the double counting of transfers.
Okay. And have you corresponded with Fingal County Council Planning Department as to whether that is their interpretation of the 2006 planning conditions?
No, we haven't.
Okay. Could I ask you maybe why not?
Look, we meet Fingal all the time. We would have conversations on this. I'm not going to go further into it than that because that wouldn't be appropriate at this point in time. I'm not going to do that. But have we discussed, look, are there discussions on that particular matter? Yes, there are, but that's our interpretation. Every passenger is counted in the 32 million, but transfer passengers only counted once.
And just maybe to help, Deputy Farrell, you've never sought clarity from Fingal as to whether that is okay with them?
No, we haven't.
Okay. Well, that is very telling, Chairman, I would submit. And perhaps the committee would consider that for future hearings, because I think it's important when you say it wouldn't be appropriate to discuss it. It's not subject to any planning matters at the moment. There's no application or review. So if it isn't appropriate now, when would it be appropriate to discuss that matter?
I think let's get to the end of the year and see what traffic number we have.
Well, I would think as a chief executive that it would be imperative to know whether you can or cannot plan beyond the 32 million. Because if the 3 million, and let's bear in mind what the inspector said in An Bord Pleanála, let's bear that in mind and consider the fact that, you know, it could be 30. It could be 35 million.
I'm clear what we're planning.
I'm not sure. Can I just come in on this, Deputy Farrell? I'm not sure anyone's asked this question, and I've been here right through the entire meeting, as has Deputy Smith, to be fair. How many transfer passengers went through Dublin Airport in 2022 and are expected to go to Dublin? So, in other words, if it's 3 million, are we out by 3 million? Is it 1 million? Is it 7 million? What's the number of transfer passengers going through the airport?
The number of
you count them once or twice?
When you count them, the number of transfer passengers going through...
Transfer journeys, if you want to call them that.
Transfer journeys, I'd need to confirm that. It's not many millions. It's not many millions. It's significantly less than 1 million. It's less than 1 million, I think, but I'd need to confirm that number.
So you're saying that the number of transfer passengers, because I would have heard stories before, and maybe they're pure anecdotes, that 40% of transit traffic or transatlantic traffic was transit traffic. And I would have thought that would be more than 1 million. But maybe it's not. Because you also told us you were one of the biggest airports in Europe going transatlantic. So if 40% of that traffic is transatlantic, I would have thought. So you might come back to us with how many transfer journeys are going through, because that's whether or not we count them once, twice, or not at all. It'll affect our understanding of the challenge.
And thank you for that, Chairman. And look, I know the committee has a lot of agencies and bodies to deal with, and I'm obviously very grateful that you've taken the time, Chairman, you specifically to call in Mr. Jacobs on this occasion, because it is important. Look, my final point, I appreciate you've been here a long time, as I said from the outset. Look, my view is really simple. You're a semi-state commercial agency. You're answerable, if you will, to the Department of Transport. My partial problem is that in this particular instance, and let's roll forward to the 31st of December at 11:59 and pretend we're sitting in one of the very nice lounges in Dublin Airport. The difficulty that I have is that your interpretation may potentially, as it did in 2019, not you personally, but the structures of DA, led to a breach of that 32 million passenger cap. We never got to determine whether that was a factual breach, but it's published, it's up on your website as we speak, 32.8 or 9 million, whatever it was. So we know you breached the planning cap then. On this particular occasion, I suppose the difficulty I have is that those extra passengers, those extra flights have an impact. And my job as a public representative representing, for the moment at least, until the redraw happens, St Margaret's and Portmarnock and Swords and Malahide in equal measure, I have to advocate for them, and they are telling me that they have a problem with the volume of flights, and that volume is clearly linked to the passenger numbers. And if we are growing at Dublin Airport in an unfettered manner, while ignoring or interpreting the planning law, that's a difficulty that public representatives and, of course, the public are feeling. So I don't know where that leaves us, Mr. Jacobs. I really don't, because I don't want to be back. I don't want the committee to call you back at the end of January when you send the economic focused press release saying, look how successful we have been. And that's great. It's wonderful. But there's a consequence. And there has to be a reckoning, because planning law shouldn't be broken, especially not by a commercial semi-state agency.
They shouldn't, and we are going to comply with the planning. I'd like to clarify one thing, if I can. We have actually written to Fingal twice on the transfer piece. So we've done that in 2020.
Did you get a response?
We didn't get a reply. So
you
just
didn't
to clarify,
get a reply?
we didn't get a reply. Okay,
interesting.
So we have engaged with Fingal twice on that matter.
May I ask, Mr. Chairman, perhaps you would take it upon yourself to write to the Chief Executive of Fingal County Council and ask if those questions have been answered, and if not, why not?
I will certainly put on the work programme for the committee to decide what we do. I don't do things on my own, but I certainly am happy for the committee to agree that, or to put it to the committee to agree.
I'm sure
they will.
If Anne-Marie Farrelly is watching, or if any of her senior management team are watching, they may take it upon themselves to answer. But I do think it will be important.
I acknowledge, Mr. Jacobs, that you haven't always been in the role you're in now, and you can't possibly know that everything that happened in the context of DAA before you got there. But there is obviously this Board Panola ruling about whether or not things are in and out, and I think they were not willing to kind of allow you to disregard transit passengers or transfer passengers, if I'm correct.
And Chairman, you're right, and I'm very happy. This is taken directly from On Board Planola's website. I'll send it to you by correspondence, but I will hand it to you and the clerk now, if you so wish. And it's very clear. Deputy Matthews read parts of it into the record.
But Deputy, if I can say, we're not ignoring. We are actively. Look,
you're actively looking to change the planning permission by
and we're actively managing.
That's very different to.
But we're also actively turning airlines away who are thinking we can do what we want at Dublin Airport. We can grow significantly. We're saying no, you can't, because we are complying.
If there was no cap, you could be at 40 million today.
Theoretically, look, I don't think there would be the airline demand. If there was no cap, is there demand from the airlines to be above 32? Yes, there absolutely is. I think a number around 35, 36 potentially. But we are not ignoring the law. We have to fully comply with the law. Our view is we are fully complying. We'll continue to until we get a new permission granted to us. And in the meantime, we have to manage down capacity. And we are actively managing down capacity.
We're not going to make charges about anybody, but we would all expect, and I'm sure you as a citizen would also expect, for everybody to comply with planning law, but particularly agencies of the state to comply with planning law, which of course you are. And just to conclude, I think at this point,
Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs, for being here for as long as you've been here. Thank you for your very comprehensive opening presentation. There's an awful lot of positivity there, but politicians, like we all tend to be very happy with the positive and then focus in on the bits that we're not positive about. So the fact that we're not talking about conveyor belts and baggage handling and lost transit suitcases and screening times of an hour and so on, which I have experienced in other airports, is all really positive. The fact that so many people want to come in and out of Ireland is really positive. So many airlines wanting to use Dublin Airport is really positive. The fact that we've got so many that we have such strong Ryanair and Aer Lingus presence at Dublin is a benefit to us all. But equally, we have to make sure from the public's perspective and from the national's perspective that Dublin Airport is long-term fit for purpose. I think you're up for that challenge, your team are up for the challenge.
Certainly.
And we want you to be successful, but within the confines of the law. And we also want you to be good neighbours, I think, with those people that may feel that you're not being good neighbours. And if that can be resolved between now and our next engagement, I think that would be positive, a win-win for everybody. So to thank you all very much. Thank you, Deputy Farrell, for attending today. Thank you, Deputy Smith. You've been here since the start with me, and thank you for that. Keeping me company, if nothing else. To thank all of our own staff. To thank your own team that are with you, Mr. Jacobs. This meeting is now adjourned. The next meeting is going to be a select committee meeting of this committee, of the select committee, if you like, with Minister Eamon Ryan on the Tuesday, November 28th, in room 2, this room at 7 o'clock in the evening. And the next joint committee meeting is scheduled for this day week, Wednesday, November 29th, with bus operators in relation to the Dublin and wider region in room 2. Thank you. Have fun.
Thank you.
Thanks, Victor.